Let me check YouTube real fast.
Yep. It says it's setting it up. So. I could have a weird inception thing when I like start my computer. Okay, cool. I think we're good to go. Summer, give me the thumbs up if
You're good. You're good, Tony.
you're good. We're good. Okay, cool. Well, welcome to Hack the Virus. I am really excited about what we're going to build. We just have so many amazing people, that I've talked to, and the people that are joined. I'm, honestly already really inspired by just like the collaboration and stuff I'm seeing in Slack, and I hope that kind of continues throughout the day. Before we really get started, what I wanted to do was I just wanted to do a moment of silence, just to put us in a place where we understand what's going on, and like the amount of suffering that has actually happened, so that we can then look more optimistically towards the future. But I mean, there are a lot of people, that have died from this. A lot of people, that are suffering in various ways, as we know. Um, and we would typically, in any other tragedy, have events where people would be doing this all over, like after 9/11 and things like that. So thought it would just be appropriate to do it. So I want to just take a minute, just to recognize like really what's been happening, and then we'll pick it up from there. So. Okay, thank you for that. Um, you know, uh, so looking towards the future, we thought it would be really, a good way to start this off, is to bring in somebody who thinks about the future a lot. His name's Steve Brown, also known as the bald futurist. We're gonna have a quick conversation, um, just about where this isn't, as you've heard probably 100 times, this is an unprecedented event, that's going on right now, and it's going to have profound impacts as we go forward as a global community. So I guess, sorry, I'm a little bit, I'm mixing up my order a little bit more. So I will first introduce some of the speakers that we have on here. So first, I want to, somebody I talked to really early on, about 2 weeks ago. Dr. Nirav Seeth is on here. And let me just see if I can give you the screen. All right, Dr. Nirav, it's good to have you on.
Oh, thanks. It's great to be here. I mean, this is a very commendable effort, getting people worldwide to help us out in the medical community. Personally, I'm an interventional cardiologist. I'm out of Paoli, Pennsylvania, and we see a lot of these patients, and we see a lot of this stuff in the community. As I mentioned in my YouTube, video, talking to Tony a few weeks ago, data are constantly changing with this. Every day there's a surge of new ideas, some good, a lot not so good. Many are not evidence-based, but a lot are worthy enough to kind of flesh out to see if there is a benefit. Being more or less on the front lines of this, we are seeing improvements. As long as people are staying home, washing their hands, practicing social distancing. These things do help. They do matter. But there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Well, we're gonna start trying to work on some of that stuff in the way that we can today. So yeah, thank you, Dr. Narav. I wanted to just quickly, Michael, if you're there, wanted to just let you give a little blurb.
Me, Michael.
You, Michael. Yes.
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Michael Wallace. I'm a market manager for the US for Ionos. For those of you who don't know us yet, we're a web hosting cloud provider, but we also offer other services in the digital space like domain registrations, online shops, website builders, collaboration, online marketing tools, etc. We have data centers in the US and Europe. Actually, the largest provider in Europe with over 30 years of experience, but we actually have been around in the US for 17 years. Yeah, we're excited to be part of the Hack the Virus hackathon, and even more excited to see what amazing projects and ideas you all come up with in your collaboration. To support the projects and to help them in their growth and extend the longevity of them, we decided we were going to give $10,000 in product and infrastructure credits. So how it works is each team that submits a project tomorrow will be able to claim their credits by Tuesday by calling our customer care, the number we will provide for you. And then they will set up an account with Ionos and deposit the credits. All you'll need to do is give them your team name and the code word hack the virus, and they will validate with the list that we give them. And you're good to go. And you can use any number of our products minus the enterprise cloud products. Yeah, we're super happy. I'm here joined with Annabelle Atchison. She's the head of US marketing. So together we kind of scrambled together and we're able to throw our hat in the ring and offer some support. So thanks, guys.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you. And yeah, Michael and Annabelle will be in our Slack channel as well. Okay, so I'm having some trouble with the spotlighting of the videos here. But anyway, so sorry, I preemptively jumped the gun on that, but I do have Steve Brown, the bald futurist, with me, and we wanted to just talk about the future and like where we're going to see this go, and as a way of just putting our minds in the right place. So Steve, first, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So hi, everybody. My name is Steve Brown. I spent 30 years in high tech, most of that with Intel in strategic planning roles. I was Intel's chief evangelist and also one of their 2 futurists. So I spend my time thinking about what's the world going to be like to live in 5, 10, 15 years from now. So I'm always looking out beyond the sort of short-term horizon. And I left Intel in 2016. I now have my own speaking consulting business. Not so much speaking these days. There's not many events for me to go and stand on a keynote stage at, but I offer consulting, coaching services for companies that are trying to figure out how do they innovate their way through this current situation, and how do they innovate their way out of recession. That's going to be the next challenge that we all face. And I'm also an author. I wrote a book that came out a couple months ago called The Innovation Ultimatum. I figured it'd be relevant for this time, how technology will combine to offer tools for innovators to drive innovation into every aspect of their business. I didn't realize quite how relevant it was going to be now that we're into 2020, because as we'll talk about in a minute, this is going to accelerate innovation across the board.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what that's where we need to be thinking. And the whole objective of this hackathon is to, really start looking at, looking at how we're going to move forward. So, Steve, I got just a handful of questions for you. So, this is an extraordinary time, as we all know. So, how do you fundamentally think that this changes us? And I know we will have a lot of these interviews where we'll be talking about it in more specifics, but from a more macro perspective, what do you see?
Well, this has been a huge shock, right, to the system, to us as individuals, to businesses, to society at large. And I think there's a couple of ways to think about this. This time, to me, is the great pause, right? This is the time when we've all been forced to spend more time in our houses, and to really think about our value systems, what is important to us as individuals. And the fragility of modern life and the system that surrounds it has been laid bare in front of our eyes. And that, with that comes this feeling of a complete lack of control, right? That illusion that we had over control in our lives has just evaporated in front of us. So that has an impact on us as individuals, as we realize we need to build more resilience into our own lives. And that'll show up in lots of different ways. People will, for years, have more toilet paper than they used to. They'll keep their pantries stocked better. They probably will have, they'll change their strategy with regard to how much cash they keep on hand. The same way that the Great Generation Depression, for decades after the Depression, kept money underneath their mattresses, literally. These types of events place long-lasting impressions on us all. So we're all going to be shaped by this in ways big and small. I think it has eroded trust. Whether it's their fault or not, it's eroded trust in brands and institutions, in government particularly, that all of those groups are going to have to earn back. And that fragility that we've all been confronted with, it's not just at an individual level. Businesses and organizations have also realized how fragile their operations are. Whether you are a pizza business or a hospital, you are realizing that maybe you weren't quite as resilient as you thought you were. So that, I think, is the biggest takeaway for this, for all of us, is that we need to build much more resilience into our society, into our businesses, into our communities as we can.
Yeah, and I mean, I think Denise, I talked to a restaurant owner in San Francisco. She's one of the, videos that we have and that we'll be airing later. And yeah, just talking about just the incredible impact that happened. 90% of revenue just going away. And people are gonna be hey, that can happen. So that's, I think that's going to be, it's going to be with us for a while. And one other thing that I was reminded of is my grandfather, who lived through the Great Depression. Whenever we were at his house trying to, figure out what ice cream we wanted to have, he would just say, "Hey, be thankful you're having ice cream," you know. And so
Yep.
in a you know, even those small things, 70 years later, that's what he was telling us. So it's yeah, it'll be crazy. So the second question, given that this has happened, now globally, what do you think is going to be different going forward?
So, as well as thinking about this time as the great pause, where we're all getting a chance to reflect, and everything from, if you live in LA, seeing blue sky for the first time in 30 years, there's lots of ways that we are reflecting. I think we can also think about this time as the great accelerator. And we're going to see things that were going to happen anyway happen much faster. So the time frame of my book was focused on this next decade. The things that I talk about in my book, I think, are going to happen in 5 to 7 years instead of 10, maybe quicker in some other cases. What do I mean by that? So when you put pressure on a system, and there's a fair amount of pressure on our system right now, when you put pressure on a system, it tends to lead to innovation. You don't have to look very far back in history to World War II to see what happened when we put extreme circumstances in front of the world, and huge amounts of innovation came out of that. So in World War II, we have modern air travel to thank for that. Jet engines, pressurized cabins, radar systems, air traffic control, all came out of World War II. Rockets came out of World War II. We wouldn't have GPS and Uber without the rockets that got accelerated as a result of World War II. So those things would probably have happened anyway, but they happened far more quickly because of World War II. So it is going to be a great accelerator of innovation. Innovation, why and how? Well, we talked about resilience, using technology to build resilience into organizations, whatever those organizations are. And we can talk about that a bit more in a minute. Using technology to build new business models. If you're a pizza company, you've had to build a new business model already, right? If you are selling cars, you've had to build a new business model. Building new channels, building new capabilities. Doing things to rise to the current challenge. But the secondary part of this challenge is the economic challenge that's going to come. And the best way to push your business through recession and to catapult yourself on a growth trajectory out of the other side of recession is to invest and innovate your way through it. It is not to save and cut. So innovation to drive automation, to drive digitization of the customer journey from end to end. So every business on the planet, no matter what industry they are in, now needs to make sure that their customer journey, from finding out about your product or service through purchase, delivery, fulfillment, customer service, loyalty program, whatever it might be, end to end, that whole thing has now to be digital. No ifs, ands, or buts. You have to do that, right? Whether that is healthcare provision, whether that is teaching, it doesn't matter. It has to be done. And we've already seen some accelerations in that area. So telehealth services have seen a major uptick. Online education is happening through necessity. Home grocery delivery services are happening. So automation of those processes, digitization of those business processes is going to accelerate and accelerate dramatically. So that's the biggest change that I see coming out of this. And on an optimistic note, I mean, this is a shitty time, right? This is not fun for anybody. No matter how much this has touched you, whether it is it has made somebody you care about sick, perhaps you've lost them to coronavirus, or this is a difficult economic time for you, or you're just sick of sitting in your own house, right? It hits us at different levels. It's not a fun time. So to look forward and think, well, okay, this sucks, but innovation and the acceleration of really cool stuff that was going to happen anyway, but we get it now years earlier, is kind of the silver lining here. And that's what everybody who's on this Zoom right now and on this YouTube call right now, this is what you're signing up to help do. So bravo, thank you. Let's innovate our way out of this mess.
Yeah, well, I love that. Love the optimistic viewpoint, I mean, that's like, in a time of, in a time of sadness, honestly, I mean, like being able to be optimistic and get things done, is incredibly important. And so that's really what we're doing here. And, hats off to everybody that signed up for this and is going to be building things for sure. And I mean, a lot of the things that you touched on, are covered in these videos. I mean, specifically, we have 4 different tracks. We have the medical response track, we have the education track, we have health and wellness, and we have small business. And so, in each of those, there's videos for each of those, resources in the Slack channel that the teams are in. To really get those ideas started. Like there's going to be, there's been a fundamental change that's happened, and there are opportunities, out there for people to, solve problems and create, create meaningful things. So Steve, there's, we're the whole next part of this, webinar and YouTube live stream is going to talk about like some of the specific problems in different areas. But again, from a macro perspective, what are some of the big problems, that you see needing to be solved as a result of this pandemic?
Sure. So the big picture here is, and it comes back to this idea of resilience, is how do we collectively now build a pandemic-ready world? This is not a one-off event. We had some shots across our bow with SARS and Ebola. Now we have a big one. Bill Gates has warned us that we should expect this maybe as often as every generation. And this current pandemic is not going to go away once it gets warm this summer. It may recede, but it's going to keep coming back until we can get a vaccine and get it widespread. So this is the new normal, and we should be ready for that. But we should be thinking forward to how do we make the world more resilient? How do we make it pandemic ready? And that means both a pandemic ready healthcare system that can scale when it comes under great demand, but also the system that surrounds the healthcare system also needs to be pandemic ready so that our economy is pandemic ready. And what does that mean? On the healthcare side, how do we do contact tracing? More automated contact tracing. You're already starting to see some moves there with APIs coming from Google and Apple to try. And the challenge here, by the way, is how do you do something for the common good, which contact tracing is all about, at the same time as balancing that against individual privacy? We're going to need tech solutions to help us think through that. We need to make a healthcare system that doesn't just rely on the brilliance of people, of the humans that work in that system and their dedication and compassion and all the awesomeness that we appreciate about the healthcare workers who are on the front line today. And by the way, my wife is a physician assistant, so I know a bit about the healthcare system as a result of that. But how do we complement that with technology to help elevate the capabilities of the healthcare system workers, to complement their activities, to build a learning healthcare system? I'll give you a couple of examples. So, I mean, recently it has become, through observation, through human observation, we have seen that laying patients on their front helps them to recover more quickly. We've also seen that in some younger patients, there is risk of blood clotting issues and stroke in younger patients. Those things have been observed by humans over time because they see different symptoms and they start to correlate those. Artificial intelligence is really good at spotting patterns in oceans of data and perhaps finding patterns that humans would not see, that would give us insights that we can then apply back to therapies, but also being able to see things more quickly than humans. So how do we build a learning healthcare system where every patient benefits from the experience we've had with every interaction between every treatment and every other patient that went before them, and complement the human intelligence with digital intelligence. So there's a lot of things we can do in the healthcare world to make it more pandemic ready and to scale better by complementing the human talent with machine capabilities. When it comes to the business side of things, small businesses in particular, they don't have an IT department, right? I am a small business. I don't have an IT department. It's me. I'm the IT department. Happens to be that I worked at Intel, so I can do some stuff, but I don't have the capability to go and build new platforms and capabilities. So think about yourselves as the world's IT department today. What can you do to build X as a service so that a small business out there that needs some new digital end-to-end service that doesn't have it today, instead of having an IT department, they can come to this hackathon and say, there's this thing that I now have that gives me a business capability to reach customers, to have a digital end-to-end journey that I didn't have before. You know, if you are a car dealer and your business model was people coming onto your forecourt and you give them a ride and then lay on the sales pitch, that's not a digital service, right? How do you complement that with digital capabilities? How do you move platforms into the cloud to give people the flexibility to work from home? How do we guard our supply chains and add track and trace? So transparency and traceability in supply chains. All of these capabilities are going to be needed by every business on the planet. And thinking about how do you build new business models and create new channels, and longer term, how do we propel ourselves out of this downturn, this economic downturn, by driving innovation into products and services for every industry to help us to create new demand for products and foment, economic activity that drives us all out of this as quickly as possible. So those are some thoughts on the big picture here, but how do we get ready to build a pandemic ready world, and what is your role in that today? If this is useful thinking, you can find me at Bald Futurist, easy to remember, baldfuturist.com. And I hope that you're going to come up with some amazing, amazing stuff today. So, my hat's off to you, and a round of applause to everybody that signed up for this today. I can't wait to see what you do.
Awesome. And Steve's in Slack too. If I probably won't be able to be there the whole time, but if people have questions for Steve,
you bet,
be great. Well, yeah, Steve, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I guess just a few things for the hackathon attendees. We're going to be we're currently matching teams right now, getting them getting them up and running. I think we have 3 or 4 teams already ready, starting to build things. So that's really exciting. I guess what we're gonna do now is just kind of play some of those interviews that I've been doing over the last 2 weeks that are just meant to spur ideas. They're available on demand, so feel free to watch this. Feel free to to hop off and just watch those on demand. And yeah, I guess the order in which we're going to be showing these videos is we're going to first start with the medical response, which is Dr. Daphne Owen in it, Dr. Nirav Seth, and Benjamin Kelowna from the VA. Then we're going to move into education, where we have Chital and Liz from Early Learning Lab, who are going to talk about how this is affecting early childhood education. And then we're going to move into small business, where we have Denise, a local small business owner in San Francisco, talk about her restaurant. Mike Simonson, who's the president of Entrepreneurs Organization, is gonna talk about what he's seeing with different members in that. And then we're gonna jump into health and at-home health and wellness, where Dr. Lisa Oldson is gonna talk to us about how to stay fit at home, And then Debbie Rosman, the CEO and president of HeartMath, is going to just talk about, some of the, PTSD that people are seeing and how to manage stress, and how to, how to stay healthy emotionally as we go through this, this crisis. And so there's going to be a ton of different software ideas that, are in a lot of these videos. And we're really excited to see what everybody comes up with. I'm just gonna basically be kind of sharing these videos out now. Feel free to stay on, check it out on YouTube, on YouTube Live, whichever works best for you. The first video I'm gonna show is a video from Dr. Daphne Owen. She is in emergency medicine at the University of Pennsylvania and doing a lot of really, really interesting things. So let me just make sure this works. Oh no, it wants me to switch. It wants me I have to jump off and hop back in for some reason. Okay, let me try this again here. Awesome. Well, I have Daphne with me. So Daphne, thanks for being with us. And could you just give us a quick intro?
Sure. So my name is Daphne Owen. I am an emergency medicine doctor in Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania. And I work in a big academic emergency department there. And I also work in a smaller community emergency department at Presbyterian Hospital in Philadelphia.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the work that you're doing. Can you give us just just some background, like what's going on? What have you been seeing the last couple weeks?
Sure. So, I think everybody's pretty familiar with what's been going on in New York City, and obviously the burden of COVID in New York City has been immense, and also in New Jersey. So here in Philadelphia, we were, really concerned about having a similar situation. Philadelphia is a city that has several million people and a really high level of poverty. So it's actually Philadelphia has the highest level of poverty of any of the 10 largest cities in the United States. And so we were very concerned about what COVID would look like here, especially because, we know that people who have less economic resources often have worse outcomes with a lot of different health issues. And we thought that COVID would probably be that way too. Luckily, Philadelphia instituted stay-at-home policies fairly early, even before New York City did, and the wave of cases really didn't start to increase here until after New York. So I think we were able to get a bit of a head start on things. And I think it remains to be seen what's going to happen as, social distancing rules are lifted or as businesses begin to reopen. And I think we're all thinking a lot also about the longer term impact of having so many closed businesses and so many people without work right now, and what that's going to mean more just for sort of access to healthcare, medications, and basic necessities for people as we go forward.
Right. So could you maybe just describe like what does capacity look like, and how is that like, and where is it, like how is it determined, and where is it at?
That's a good question. I think, there's a lot of components of it. One is just physical space. So, for example, just having enough physical beds and rooms to put people in is really important. And then, I think another really important one, people talk a lot about the ventilators, but, the ventilators themselves, that's one important issue, but having the staff and the people to like operate those is a whole nother issue. So not just doctors and nurses, but respiratory therapists and medications that allow people to be sedated enough to be on ventilators. Like all of those things are part of the capacity issue. We, in Philadelphia, and I think in a lot of other parts of the country, most hospitals and emergency departments run at pretty much full capacity or close to full capacity all of the time. And so one of our biggest concerns was like, if we get, we're already almost full, if we get a whole bunch more people with COVID, like that's going to totally overwhelm us. So capacity then would be, space, medications, machinery, equipment, and people. And, the people issue is also important because as, people get exposed and have to be out on quarantine, that cuts down the number of workers that we have in the hospital. But
right. And so how is the hospital addressing the needs to have those different people, and how I guess how are those people trained, and like is it something they can train on quickly? Is it
so for myself, as an ER doctor, I put people on ventilators all the time, but to like actually push the buttons on it to make it do what I need to do is not part of, I can sort of do it, but it's not really part of my training. I rely on like a whole nother person to operate the machine. So, those kinds of skill sets are pretty complicated. And I think, difficult to learn rapidly. So ER doctors and ICU doctors or critical care doctors are pretty familiar with, ventilators and doing critical care. So a lot of, from a staffing perspective, we've been thinking about how to have those people and anybody who has that skill set be ready to do those jobs where needed, and then pull people with other skill sets in to utilize them as they're able. So, one of the things that we looked at Penn was, okay, we needed to run testing sites. So we set up some drive-through testing sites, and doctors need to order the tests and staff the sites. And so ophthalmologists and dermatologists and people who, normally do other things were brought in to do that kind of work. So there's been a lot of kind of readjusting who's doing what and figuring out who has the skill set to operate where needed. I think we've also had just the staffing issue is really difficult because we have, over years and years figured out how many people do you need nurses and doctors wise on a given day, right? So how many people do you need to staff an emergency room? But right now that's all completely different because, we don't really have a way to predict like next week, do we need 10 doctors on at one time or 3, and so that's been really a lot in flux and fairly challenging to figure out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so maybe, again, we're looking for software solutions. So maybe it's, maybe there's something around, something to address staffing. I mean, obviously it's very complicated and nuanced, but I mean, it could be something that could help with that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. Even just, I think to compare, like, to have a way to compare, what is our volume like right now or today, to try to predict, okay, in the next couple of days, do we need more people or less people on?
Right.
Because I think even big hospitals like ours are going to be financially hurting from all of this, because a lot of the things that we normally do that generate revenue, like elective surgeries and stuff like that, are on hold. And so we don't want to have 20 people sitting around doing nothing if they're not needed. And so I think having like the ability to help model how many people we actually need would be helpful.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've been working on that I think probably there could be some development around is I have a lot of friends and people that I know in Philadelphia constantly asking me, like, where can I get a test? And honestly, like, I don't really know all the time. I have the list from the city of where you can go, and I send people to that. But I think there's like potential for app development or software development around, like, me as an individual plug in what kind of insurance I have, and like it could show me where I could go to get a test.
Right. Yeah,
so I think that's like that's a big one.
Yeah, and so for somebody who's uninsured, there's like I've lost my job, haven't been able to get like any new health insurance. I mean, I think that's probably a common situation, right? So like, and now I have, now I'm experiencing some shortness of breath. What would somebody like that do?
What would they do? So it's tough. And that's a little bit why I was thinking about, an app to find testing sites for people, especially without insurance. So, I have one friend who's in that situation, who's been trying to figure out how to get a test without insurance. And it's hard to kind of dig through. There's, at least in Philadelphia, and imagine lots of other places, there's universities that have set up testing sites. The city has set up testing sites, and trying to figure out like which one of those you can go to without insurance and without a doctor's prescription is challenging.
Gotcha.
So it'd be cool to figure out how to like, put all that information in one place for people. Like, I don't have insurance, where can I go to get a test? So right now, what I specifically use is the City of Philadelphia Public Health Department has a website with all of the different testing sites. So I've just been sending that to friends or patients who are hoping to get a test. It's really challenging here. A lot of them are drive-through. So like, if you don't have a car, you can't go get the test. So it's fairly brutal.
Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot that probably can be done. Like, very simply to just get information to people who might not have it. And most, so here in Philadelphia, most cities like this and other places have some kind of county or city or federally qualified health center, which is like a place where you can go and get healthcare even if you're uninsured. But I think a lot of people just don't really know about that, or like know how to access it. I mean, I guess the other thing is just that, there's insurance, there's ways to get cheap insurance. There's ways to get free emergency medical assistance. A lot of it's just like that people don't really know what resources are there, Right. Yeah. And I'm sure it's like, it's state by state, county by just a centralized hub for doing some of that stuff it might take some legwork pulling all that information in, but it might save a lot of lives,
Yeah, another one just would be we've been working on figuring out how to monitor people and just check in on them and have a way to make sure that people who are getting worse get the care that they need, and then people who are okay kind of just get the reassurance. that they need. And around that, for COVID, really, there's not a whole lot that we can do unless people truly are developing breathing difficulty. So, for most of us who get COVID, it's going to be just kind of like the flu, and there's not a whole lot to do except stay home, take Tylenol, rest, whatever. But then once people truly have difficulty breathing or shortness of breath, that's where we can intervene and give them, supplemental oxygen, or if needed, escalate to being on a ventilator. And so, I would love to be able to put all of my patients on pulse oxes that measure their oxygen level at home, because that would be like a huge help to know, does this person truly need to come into the hospital or not? And that's, they're hard to buy right now. So that would be another like super cool thing, is if there's some kind of way to either, do that from a iPhone, or even just like find a proxy for it.
Yeah. So, and so you mentioned this is something that measures your respiratory rate or something like that, like.
The pulse ox measures your respiratory rate, but it like goes on your finger, and it measures the oxygen saturation of your blood, basically. So for us, I think they're fairly simple devices. Like there's even disposable ones that we use in the hospital that just stick on your finger like a Band-Aid. And then this is more like a hardware thing, but like it would be really helpful to know that information, because that's really an indicator for us of when someone needs hospitalization, is having a low oxygen saturation on their pulse oximeter reading.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
we can link to it. There might be some people who have like more of a hardware bent in this.
Even heart rate and respiratory rate are potentially helpful. Like, when I'm making the decision at my job, what I care most about is the oxygen saturation, but respiratory rate sort of correlates with that, and heart rate. So if like you're just sitting there resting and your heart rate or respiratory rate are high, that's concerning to me that something is going on.
So by respiratory rate, you mean like breaths per minute?
Yep.
So it could even just be something where it's like, hey, record your breaths per minute and, report that to your doctor, and do that every day or something like that. Like,
yeah. And I would imagine that that's something that is, fairly doable, because if phones can measure, like Apple Watches can measure your heart rate, some kind of like app to either teach people how to do that, or, for me as like a clinician, what we usually do, it's typically one of the nurses' jobs when they're checking vitals, is to sit there and like actually count the breaths per minute. And so I wonder if there's a way to kind of like, figure out how to do that, just even from watching someone talk or just sitting there and looking at them. Like you can often visually sort of pick up on that.
Yeah, no, that's incredibly interesting. I'll leave it to teams to try to come up with something there. But yeah, that'd be really cool if somebody came up with something.
Yeah.
So,
there's also one more thing before I forget. There's something just as another corollary to that. There's been some work to measure, like ask people to count 30 and see how far they can get before they have to stop and take a breath, right? So if you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and you can keep going, that suggests that your breathing is fine. Whereas if you have to stop at 8 and take a breath, that suggests that you're like having more true breathing difficulty. So there's a score for that called the Roth Score, which people could look up. It's not like totally verified by research as being like a great corollary, but it might be helpful.
Yeah, it's more of
it's ROTH, Roth.
Somebody comes in, like you give us just a rundown of like what happens, like if somebody comes in from COVID, like what's the pattern that has been emerging?
Typically, I think most of what we've been seeing is a lot of people who come in, they don't feel great, they have their cough, they have their fever, and if their vital signs are good, I tell them, look, I'm going to send your COVID test. there's really not much we can do for you here since you're breathing well. Go home, take good care of yourself at home. But if you start developing difficulty breathing, you need to come back so that I can check your oxygen level and stuff, so that's kind of where like
those tests would be like,
yeah. Okay. If I could like ideally send somebody home with a pulse ox to check, and like, so they would know, hey, now I'm starting to have more difficulty. I need to go back to the ER. And, this has been, for a lot of us, really challenging because, if you come into the ER and you look great right now, it doesn't mean you're not going to be great tomorrow. And so like, I have to really try to hammer home to people, this could change and you got to come back if you start feeling worse, Yeah. But I think it would give people a lot of reassurance to have, a lot of people, like, they're worried about going home, understandably, but so I think it would give people a lot of reassurance if they had a way to kind of monitor themselves with numbers or data.
Right. I guess thinking about that, like long term, how, how do you think this is, and we talked a little bit about like, hey, hospitals are going to start needing to do what they typically do other than COVID. Mm-hmm. But other than that, do you think any other, things being bounced around just like, at the hospital or like, things that are going to need to change?
So much telehealth and like telemedicine has happened in the last month. I mean, some healthcare systems were doing it. Mine particularly wasn't doing a whole bunch, but like now all of a sudden, all of us are credentialed to do telehealth. We have licenses in multiple states because it was like, all right, we have to do this. Like we have no other way to do healthcare. And I think like so many industries have changed to the point where like, you can get whatever you want immediately on your phone. And I think healthcare is going to start to go more that way as this has sort of like prodded us to do telehealth. Well, I think people are going to feel that that's more what they expect. And so we're going to have to figure out how to develop more technology to make that more like work better. I think there's a lot that's been done, but yeah.
Well, I'm sure we could have a whole other conversation about just like telemedicine and telehealth.
Yeah.
And, different opportunities there. But it would be potentially interesting for people like maybe to check out the different telehealth options out there if there's a better way that people feel that people people can connect. Because you're not the first.
And like
has said that.
I think also just kind of going back to what we were talking about with like the pulse ox and the respiratory rate and all of that, there's a lot that you can get as a clinician just from looking at someone on the screen, but there's some like data that would be really helpful and make the tool much more powerful if there was a way to figure out how to get some of those like basic vital signs information from the patient through telehealth.
So, I mean, any other things long term as far as like what you see changes, how this thing is, how we're going to come out of this?
Yeah. I mean, I think really more accessibility, like digital accessibility to, like more than just the telehealth we think of in terms of like a visit, but as an emergency department person, there's a lot of people who come to the ER for non-emergency things just because they don't know where to go or they can't get an appointment. And so I think that is a potential there for like using telehealth, not just for the visit itself, but for helping people connect to like, I need to see, this happened to me just the other day. I need to see a gynecologist. I can't figure out how to see one. And so I'm going to show up to the ER and like have someone help me get my problem solved, And so some of that, I think that would be like a really valuable thing to give people a way to like access what they need digitally or figure out how to get that appointment or get in touch with who it is that they need. And, like just like so many other industries, like we were talking about, have gone that way that like, you get whatever you want delivered right to your phone or right to your door. I think more and more that's going to be what people expect. There's also, I think there's been a fair amount of work done on this, but just in general, like in medical, like the medical world, communication between teams is very poor. And so there's been development around like, like there's different programs for teams that are taking care of one patient to share information among each other. But I think that's really going to be important too going forward, is just how to make sure everyone's on the same page, and all of the teams, especially these complicated patients in the ICU, they have like a renal specialist and a lung specialist and a heart specialist and an infectious disease specialist, like all taking care of them. And often there's so much information in this like digital world that nobody's really talking to each other, and it sort of just becomes overwhelming.
Yeah. We've I know at my company we've done some work with like EMR systems. Those systems, at least from our experience, are pretty like difficult to use, and so maybe even just like a more user-friendly layer on top of that.
Yeah. And for like us on the clinician side, like I think people are just so beaten down by the EMRs, like because there's just so much data that like you have to put in, that I feel like I'm often spending so much time sitting in front of a computer rather than talking to a person. And so I wonder if there's a way, like especially with a lot of us are using voice recognition technology to like help write the note and stuff. But if in the future there's a way for that, like while you're talking to the patient, to have that conversation just go into the note, so I don't have to sit there and write it myself.
Yeah, if a team wants to get ambitious, they could do natural language processing on something to feed into an EMR. That would be crazy. Maybe a prototype in a hackathon, and then could develop it further. Would be fun. Well, and useful. Awesome. Well, I want to respect your time. And is there anything else that you think teams hacking on software should know going on with the
I guess just like I mentioned it, but I think one of you guys could make an app for people to figure out where they can get a test. That would be awesome. Cool. Well, it's really great that you guys are working on this. And I think, for people like me who are just, I guess in the thick of it a little bit, it's just so cool that there's so many people interested in working on these issues. So thanks to you for organizing, and thanks to everybody that's going to be involved in the hackathon.
I'm here with Nirav. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. All right. So my name is Nirav Sheth. I'm an interventional cardiologist in Paoli, Pennsylvania. I am board certified in internal medicine, general cardiology, interventional cardiology, as well as 4 imaging subspecialties in cardiology. I have a degree in business and healthcare administration as well. So, I've been asked to, sit on this panel to help bring a medical perspective, I guess, to this, a fantastic approach of innovation that we're trying to get everybody involved so that we can help communities short-term, long-term, and here and around the world. It's my understanding.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got teams of people, developers and designers who are sitting at home with, with time on their hands right now, and wondering outside of social distancing and washing their hands, what are some of the things they can do? I know, Nirav, we were talking about before, that really we're seeing things broken down into short-term, mid-term, and long-term. And so I think it would be great if you could just elaborate on some of those things and what you're seeing, and then we can dig into, maybe what some of those technical solutions would be to help some of those things.
Of course, and I like to think of this in the short, intermediate, and long term, because each of those, while they're linked together, have specific requirements. Short term is, how do we contain this now? And that's where social distancing and hand washing come into play here. So short term, just awareness is the most important component of this. In terms of supply, personal protective equipment to hospitals is in short supply. There are lots of movements around the world to find alternatives.
Yeah. And so Nirav, what are some of the things that you're, from an awareness perspective, that you feel are the most, maybe just not communicated well, or the things people are having the most difficulty understanding? Because there might be some opportunities to help there.
Of course. From an awareness standpoint, I think a lot of it is mixed media. We get a lot of media overload right now. So breaking it down into what the virus is, how it spreads, and then following those general, hygiene recommendations that have been in place for 70 years are important. Okay. Expecting that if you're between the ages of 18 and 25, you're not going to get sick from this, it's not true. The biggest misunderstanding I've seen about that is that younger generations feel that they're immune, but trying to reinforce to them that this is not about one generation. This is about the entire human society, human species. The 1918 Spanish flu killed 50 million people, with 500 million people worldwide infected. Without containment, without adequate education, we are looking at that level of pandemic.
Awareness short term to help with that. I'll probably follow up with you with maybe some resources that we can give people to maybe think of ways that we can help with that awareness. That would be a really great opportunity for some people to work on that.
Sure.
And so you mentioned the personal protective equipment, and we've been hearing a lot about supply shortages and people shipping things different places. And so, for a team working at home, there are databases and things like that we could potentially build pretty quickly.
Yes.
Do you see, what are you seeing as far as just the demand for that, and is, I don't know, we can have more of a conversation around maybe a way to, I don't know, solve that problem.
So I think there are two components to the quote supply shortage. Number one, in any given scenario, we have a certain stock supply of medical grade personal protective equipment. And this is no difference. The other part of this is that we have a mass panic that is scooping up personal protective equipment of medical grade for personal and or community use in terms of hoarding. The people who need the N95 masks, the medical grade droplet protection masks, are first responders, emergency room, physicians, nurses, respiratory therapists, people who are in direct exposure with somebody who is likely to have coronavirus. In terms of building your own stuff at home, that's where I would actually look into our material science folks at home, look at testing for airborne droplet filtration and creating home masks.
Right. Okay. So I could see maybe a solution to this being, again, in the awareness camp, how to actually protect your protect yourself at home, and the things that you can do at home so that you can also give back some of the stockpiles of things that you have. And then another thing that's coming to mind for me is maybe there's an opportunity for hey, you've been prepping for a while and you have a stockpile of this stuff. And so there could be a way to say, hey, I want to donate this, and we can maybe coordinate, coordinate it with it to have it go to the right places.
Absolutely. It will be much appreciated in any healthcare community to have a donation of personal protective equipment.
So I've been seeing a lot where people have been like 3D printing things at home and stuff. Like what, what would you say is and honestly, part of the hackathon was inspired by, seeing some of that stuff. So what is there a way that people can help create things at home and then give them to the medical community?
I think so. Anything that's created at home would obviously need to be at least, tested a little bit. In terms of 3D printing things like eye shield frames where you can put plastic inserts in, parts of masks, respirators, which you can put a filter in. You can 3D print components of personal protective equipment and then add other layers of fabric and or filtration, tissues onto it and create a seal.
So that's the short term. And then getting into like, midterm and long term, because I think that's where, there might be even more opportunity as we kind of come out of the initial shock of this.
Of course. So the short term really lays the groundwork for midterm or intermediate level of help with this sort of thing. If the more you do in the short term, to quote, flatten the curve, and I hope everybody understands the concept behind flattening the curve here. So in terms of short-term treatments, antivirals are going to be important. Making sure that we have supplies of some of these agents are going to be important. And then leading into the long term is basically prevention. Again, hand washing, but vaccines. The IBM machine in Washington, D.C. came up with the DNA sequence of this particular strain of coronavirus a few weeks ago in 3 days, which is unheard of. Now we're looking at labs around the world who are trying to come up with vaccine solutions. In terms of our programmers at home, I'm not sure if anyone is old enough to remember the SETI at Home project, but the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence created a shared data processing system back in the late 90s where you would download an app, it would run in the background of your computer, and it would process data, So we have a large amount of data that's just sort of hanging out in cyberspace right now, where it needs to be collectively processed, analyzed, so that we can have a directed assault on this particular virus.
Right.
The thing about that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask, do you know, where the current web efforts for that?
I don't. There are patches that I've seen here and there, but nothing that's a kind of a worldwide concerted effort.
Mm-hmm.
And most of it is restricted to kind of labs who have access to it, to the virus itself. They're running direct testing. Now, the thing about testing is it has to start with theory. And if you have a genome, which we do, you can run, programs. You can run simulations from your kitchen or your, home office on your computer.
Cool. Well, we'll try to track that down and maybe make that available to people to at least look at, because I mean, I don't think we'll be able to like run simulations and solve the problem is, but I do think, that maybe building a thing that allows people to get access to that data even could be a step in the right direction.
Instead of having, my personal opinion on this is that instead of having every country in the world have its own response system to this, if you have a coordinated worldwide response to any particular pandemic threat, and have an ability to quickly analyze the virus, come up with a solution, and have that process in place, it becomes almost a plug and play situation.
Obviously, that's a tall order and going to be a global effort, but I do think maybe some things where we're thinking about thinking about some of the foundations of this. I mean, like really, we're going to come out of this, and there's going to need to be that sort of infrastructure built, and so it's got to start with somebody putting one foot in front of the other and starting to put a solution out for it. So. And one thing I've been thinking about is, I mean, so we're going through this big lockdown, and everybody's at home, and so midterm, I imagine that there will start being restrictions eased and people will start going out, but then everybody's been talking about second wave, third wave. Right.
The idea about reintroducing, normal life a little bit slower over maybe say a few months is so that that peak, that third wave, fourth wave, and so forth, is smaller and smaller.
So I see there might be an opportunity from a development perspective. I mean, we have all these like maps that show all the different coronavirus cases around the world, but it might be like, some way of saying, hey, here's now that restrictions are getting loosened, here are the new guidelines, and helping people understand what that is and like how it's safe, because it's not. I mean, a lot of people are saying, hey, we're just going to go back and it's going to just, be back like before this. And that's probably not going to happen for a long time. I would love to start talking about more long-term things with you if you have the time, but I want to just be cautious. I know you're busy. You got a shift later today.
Once we get to the vaccine stage, then it's like vaccinating against the flu annually, because this is a virus. It will mutate. It will come back and have some good years, some bad years, and there might be, of the 4 strains that are known right now, maybe, vaccines against those 4, there might be a 5th or 6th strain later. But once you develop a vaccine and you develop what's called herd immunity that comes with it, the virus becomes endemic and will surge every so often, but not nearly to this level. Okay. Mm-hmm. Getting to that point, that's a timeline where this stuff, what we're doing right now, actually matters.
I guess like we're probably a bit too early to really be focusing on long term. I mean, it looks like it's short and midterm that we really need to focus on right now to build the foundation.
Correct. Well, it's in tandem. You do need to focus on the long term, because if you aren't working on a vaccine now, then and you start in 6 months from now, it's 18 months from that point. So we're looking at 2 years versus maybe a year to year and a half for a vaccine. The hard part is resource utilization in an uncontrolled setting. And that's why, what I mentioned in the beginning, the faster and better we can contain this now, the more resources we can allot to actually finding a long-term solution for this and containment program.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like our best attempts at long term is to figure out that short term.
Right.
I mean, I guess in like long term too is like more, kind of mental health and things like that people are going to be going through too.
I'm glad you mentioned that. There are a lot of mental health related issues that are arising. At least in the last 2 weeks, I've seen several articles about depression at home. Unfortunately, increases in things like domestic abuse. Suicide rates are predicted to increase. So all of these things. So while people are socially isolating, they absolutely need to be in contact via video or phone with their neighbors, their friends, family members. These things, while you're looking at your same 4 walls every day, will get you through this. It reminds you that there are people out there, there are people in the same situation that you're in, and it will boost your health. On top of that, home exercise programs are going to be important.
Well, we're going to be doing our best to try to get some stuff built, short term, long term, and yeah, there's a lot of work to be done, and I mean, you're on the front lines, and so thank you for doing what you do and taking time to talk with us. I guess any just like parting thoughts and
honestly, the best thing I can say is there is a lot of misinformation out there, so do your homework. And the best person to talk to is any real healthcare professional that a doctor, a nurse who is working in this. If you leave yourself to get your information from the 6 o'clock news, you might get scared and go into a panic. And that's the worst thing we can have for people, because that'll worsen everything. This is an important part of what we do, is disseminating good information. And so people are safe. I know that they are safe and they are going to get taken care of.
Awesome. All right, cool. So with me right now, I have my friend, Benjamin Kelowna. I will let you introduce yourself, Ben.
Hey, how's it going? My name's Ben Kelowna. My background is in industrial engineering, and I work in process improvement at the VA system and do some consulting work at other local Boston systems as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and so I've known Ben a long time. Well, he's been working at the VA and other hospitals, and I thought it would be a really good idea to bring him on. I've been talking with Ben just about like what they're starting to see. It sounds like where Ben works in Massachusetts, it's starting to see a spike right now. So Ben, we really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's really busy, but wanted to just get your thoughts on, short, medium, and long-term effects of this and what might be some software that we can do. And I know you had some ideas around like specifically data and things like that would be really interesting to dive into.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I want to start with is, just like short term, like what's going on right now, what might be some, I don't know, operational things that could get handled. I know you're always thinking about software, so.
Yeah, I definitely am kind of one of the intermediaries in the hospital systems about balancing kind of software needs with operational needs. And so I'd say right now, in the short term, I think we are in a pretty stressed situation. And because of that, we kind of have to categorize things into priorities and set restrictions in certain areas where we can. So, I'd say in the short term, if we realize, we're going to be short in specific inventory areas or supply areas, that if we can figure out how to best manage the supply we have and set in certain criteria, kind of like, super strict or super open, I think that thinking with that in terms of kind of some of the current trends we're seeing across states could be really helpful. So I think like in the short term, it's kind of, how do we manage limited resources we may have with what we already know with some of the other early states in terms of trends and patient demands along those lines.
And so specifically, you're talking about like the masks and the ventilators and stuff like that.
Absolutely. I think those are the critical elements, but I think that there's other elements that also come into the supply chain. So, you think about test kits or swabs, those are also in that camp. Now, it's going to be different setting those criteria for those different supplies. I think, if we're looking about something like, test kits or something like that, we can set criteria and priorities with our clinical staff about, who's the most important to test. And then if you think about, let's say on the PPE side, you can say, okay, well, here's our supply, where we're at, and some expected demand. How can we really get the most out of each unit of PPE, and what priorities and criteria can we set in that space so that we can try and make sure that we're going to be covered in all our camps across the board. Mm-hmm. But I think that as we get more info on, more incoming PPE or test kits or other supplies, we can start changing those criteria. And we want to make sure that if we do change those criteria, that we're matching that up with what we're seeing with some of the earlier states in terms of expected patient demand.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so I think there's like kind of maybe two things here that could kind of plug together. So there's tracking what we've seen from other states as this kind of moves state to state. Well, not moves, but just spread. I don't know. Spreads like starts affecting different states at different times, like the peak happening. So there's tracking that data and kind of predicting what the supplies might be. So there could be some pretty cool like data analysis there that could happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, I think for folks like me that are really data driven, there's a lot of data out there. And I think, one of the challenges for someone like me is, I might have to go and try and hunt it down. And I think that's definitely a challenge in some of the times like these where most of my efforts need to be kind of focused on, the operational side. So I know that, departments of public health and the CDC is publishing a lot of data on trended positive results and total number of tests done. But it's kind of difficult for someone like me to try and track all that down in kind of a usable format. I think in the hospital, we pretty much live in Excel worlds. Might not be the most advanced tool, but anytime we can get, data sets exported to Excel, that's how we'll tie them in with maybe what our internal needs are within a specific hospital system.
Yeah, wow. So even something just as simple as like consuming data and exporting it in Excel could be
just like a good data repository, that kind of brings in from various sources. I mean, you kind of have your national and high level information, on like CDC sites, but if you work at a smaller facility like in some of the areas across Mass, you might think, okay, well, I could really use some specific Massachusetts data, which is pretty much on the Department of Public Health website. But when you kind of go there, it's in Word documents or PDFs, and I would much prefer something like just an Excel document with numbers in it, so that I can try and match that up with maybe what some of our needs are on the hospital side.
Yeah, well, maybe we can. I know if you share with us the links, we can kind of connect it to this video, and teams that are interested in it can look at it. I mean, ideally we could find some API or something like that could be plugged into. But I mean, that could also just be part of what somebody researches and tries to find how to connect those data sources. For sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the other side of that I thought was interesting that you mentioned is actually just like surfacing the new criteria or the new hey, we're I don't know, and maybe I'm just interpreting this, but tell me if I'm wrong. It's like you have to make a decision like, okay, there's we don't have enough masks or something like that, for us to operate the way that we've been doing so. So here's some new guidelines for like, hey, you might need to use the mask, 1 mask per day or something like that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of coming up with strategies to stretch what supplies we have, and I'll kind of go over 2 examples. So one example, let's say with the masks and the PPE is, we first set in guidance about here's ways that we can try and conserve and restrict PPE use within a hospital system. But then it also, highlights other opportunity spaces, not only for this crisis, but moving forward, like let's say getting our hands on things that could sterilize some PPE that we could reuse. So I think it kind of highlights some of those, and we can pursue those strategies. Now, adopting those strategies also comes with other challenges, like learning and implementing new processes. But I think that's one example kind of in the PPE space where we can try and shape our, the demand that we'll need based off of kind of some incoming trends. So, and I'd say kind of the other piece of that would, let's say if you want to talk about kind of testing, right? So like right now, if we're short on test kits, we're going to set stricter criteria on who we're actually testing. So we might not test anyone who's asymptomatic. Maybe they need to be an at-risk patient or a first responder. But I think as the supply increases, we want to be able to test more and more people, because I think, the more folks that we can test and kind of wrap our head around, the better we're going to be able to kind of respond to this effort and try and keep other people safe. And I think too, when you talk about some of those other data trends that we're seeing, at the, state and national level, those are other things to kind of keep an eye on, because some of the things that we're doing, like the number of tests, will impact those trends. So, if I think most states likely have some stricter criteria around testing, they probably need to be symptomatic or a first responder or an at-risk patient. And I think that impacts some of the data we see on both the state and the national level about the number of positives, even things like mortality rate. And I think that as those criteria start changing with an increase in the inventory, it'll help us execute things better at the hospital level. But I think also we'll see some different trends on the data side on even the sites like the CDC and Department of Public Health and things like that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like really there's an input problem. It's like we have a lot of different things that we, you know, we're trying to pull different things that don't necessarily match up and create correlations between those. So just having some way of processing that and surfacing that data appropriately, and then the output side of that actually getting, actually being able to determine what the criteria is for a test or something like that. And
Right. Yeah. It's digesting all that data that's out there, and how can we use that to kind of inform, operational decisions at the hospital level.
yeah, I could see it almost being like two different teams hacking on, like one the input, one the output, and then maybe they combine at the end to make something, because that would be really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so what? I mean, so you're in operations, so I think it's supply and demand and making sure all that is managed operationally. I think yeah, that's probably where you're focused. Is there any other, maybe like mid to long term problems that you're seeing? Or it sounds like this is a pretty, getting this right, at least the data consumption piece of it is a long, eventually turns into a long-term thing, hopefully.
Right. I mean, I think that's one of the things, right now, from an operations perspective, we're kind of, building the plane while flying it. But I think that we're using whatever data we have available to kind of inform those decisions. But as you think about medium and long term, I think that data is going to continue to become more accurate and more informative. So I think that if we can identify, like if you think about like mid and long term, trying to go back and match up, certain areas of the data and kind of see what that shows you, I think that really helps inform folks at higher levels about the impacts of certain decisions. So I think, if you look at various spikes across cities and states, and you could match it up with kind of, here's a major action that, let's say, a governor took about, a stay-at-home order, and you look at that state's data, I think that medium and long term, everyone's going to be looking back and saying like, okay, well, what was the impact of that? Did we see any decreases? And it's a complicated exercise, and I think there's a lot of really smart people doing it, but for folks like me, I'm interested in maybe just a couple really good data points that we can, tie to a trend. There's not enough time to build really complex models. I think there are folks doing that, but those, are all projections, and nothing is really perfect. So it's how can we figure out what we can use now, and then how's that going to inform us, in the mid and long term. And I think that's still kind of undecided. I think we're kind of learning as we go here.
Yeah. So I mean, it might just be experimentations with like data visualization of like, hey, on a state by state or even county by county level, like, hey, the different graph lines and stuff like that. So people can dig into the different trends and look at, oh, hey, this event happened here. Is that what you're saying? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that it would, because if it's tying some of those things that we're doing to try and be proactive to manage this crisis, and if we're doing certain actions at certain points in time, we want to know, what's the impact of that. And we also have to understand that the things are going to continue to spread and progress, and there's not going to be a silver bullet. But the actions that we are taking, we want to know what's been impactful, and as the waves kind of continue, as things kind of start to open back up, how does that impact things moving forward? Because that's really when you start thinking about your medium and your long terms. When the first governor says we're going to open up Georgia again, well, let's look in 2 weeks and see what was the impact of making that decision, and how does that really impact some of the hospital systems.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we kind of have 50 different experiments going throughout
Exactly.
right now,
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's the thing, that's a lot of data that's going to be available, and it's really hard to kind of match up what's important. So I think, someone to help start to get all that into one place, even in a somewhat usable format, I think is definitely a need even on the front line, so that I can go somewhere and say, here's the way Massachusetts is trending, and I can export it to Excel and compare it to my own facility and, see, okay, here's what's happening. And if I can look at another state that might be in a similar demographic as mine, I could say here might be some things we can expect,
Right. Yeah, historians are going to be crunching these numbers for a long time. So us trying to get ahead of that is going to be is going to be pretty important.
Yeah.
So outside of like the data and things like that, as far as operations is concerned at the VA, I'm curious like how you all are recording tests and how like how that's happening, and not saying maybe it's handled and that's not something that can be helped with, but like as far as who's gotten a test and things like that, like are there systems built for that? Is it yeah, I don't know. I'm actually just very curious about that.
Yeah, no, so absolutely. And I mean, I think one of the big benefits of working for the VA system is they have a very robust, medical record system. And I think that the benefits of that are that we're able to really track the patients extremely well through this process and kind of ensure that no one's falling through the cracks. I think that some of our challenges are kind of coming on, let's say the employee side, because, not everyone who's an employee gets their care at the hospital that they work. And I think that when that happens, there's always an element of information that's just going to be a mystery, and there's a lot of human factors involved. And so when that is the case, and let's say it's something that's not, you're able to kind of pull out in a query in a medical record system, how do we kind of manage and track that data and information? And that's always evolving. And I think that's one of the things at the VA that has been a challenge, and we're continuing to try and tackle that the best we can. But yeah, it's an ever evolving situation.
Yeah. So I'm sure there'd be like a lot of HR stuff and a whole bunch of things that would need to be figured out. But I mean, some way for I mean, even maybe just prototyping could be helpful. Is some way of actually, having a record of who at the hospital has been tested, has antibodies, is cleared, like, that sort of thing. That would that be helpful? I mean, and like I said, it's probably not going to be rolled out, like, because of all the HR concerns around that, but it could be something to at least get started. I don't know.
Yeah, so we have a couple of systems like that in place right now. But again, they're not perfect. But we have to keep an eye on all our employees, and especially how they're moving even through the hospital system. So I think too that there could be a kind of a more niche need there, where we're really looking at staff moving through a hospital system and where they might have been and who they've interacted with, because from an infection prevention standpoint, that's always a challenge to try and kind of map out exposure rates. And I think, we're doing the best that we can to try and, talk with those folks that we are testing about what they might have been doing or where they've been. But it's difficult to kind of, piece all of those together, both from a data perspective, but also even just from, a data entry point, how are we getting this information, and, what would be ways that we could automate any of it. It's definitely a challenge, and I think that's something that everybody is struggling with, because it's out there. So
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean, things that help with just tracing. I mean, everyone's saying contact tracing. I know Apple and Google are working on that. But I mean, it sounds like it's even more critical at like a niche level within hospitals and stuff like that. So I don't know, could be something for people to mess with.
Yeah.
It sounds like for you, the data piece is definitely like the most important.
Yeah, I mean, and again, that's only because, that's my day-to-day work. I think that if you talk to, physicians and nurses, their needs are going to be way different than mine. So I think that it's just what expertise you have and what you need, and everyone's trying to, do what they can do to help. So, and, data is definitely just up my alley. So that's really my area of concern and things that I'm really looking at day to day.
Yeah. And on that, like with data, have you seen any like other hospitals reporting specific data around like, how they've handled things? And if we were able to get our hands on something like that, analyzing those sorts of things be helpful to you?
Yeah, so I think one of the benefits of, let's say, some of the even just the sites that I've mentioned is that there are a lot of reporting requirements, and we do need to roll up a lot of valuable info. I think the one piece that's missing and kind of more of a challenge is what are hospitals doing about certain things? I think you really kind of have to get that from the news or by kind of doing your own research. But if we can identify one hospital system that seems to be outperforming others, it would be, really awesome if you could figure out, well, what are some of their processes and procedures that could potentially be resulting to that, and like what you be able to adopt. And so kind of like an example of that is when, we were first gearing up for testing, we were looking about, how are we going to set up our drive-through clinic for the hospital system. And, the first thing we did is really kind of cast nets out and say, who's already got this up and running? And, we got a documentation from Connecticut and the VA down there, but also the Yale medical system. And, it was a really helpful kind of blueprint for us figuring out what our needs were for that. But I think, the same thing could be done if it could be, networked in some sort of way. If you see good positive data trends at a specific area, is trying to figure out and tap into what are, that system's operational aspects that could be kind of contributing to it.
Right. And so, since drive-through testing and all this stuff from an operational perspective is new, maybe even just some place for hospitals to be able to exchange blueprints on how they handle this stuff, like could be helpful. I'm assuming you're facilitating this over email, just reaching out to people right now? Or...
Yeah, for the most part, it's over email. And then there's I can try and track down some other sources where we might find operations, but a lot of that, it might come down as guidance from state or national level, or it might just be something where, we need to do something and we try and just reach out over our internal networks and say, who's been working on this, or, how have you been approaching this? Because, again, it's also hard to say, here's how we're doing it. And even though we have great results, hospitals are complex organizations, and it's difficult to kind of try and replicate something exactly. But, if you can use those as guiding principles, that's really helpful. And so I think that any sort of area where that could be organized or put together, I think could be hugely beneficial. But again, I think the challenge there is getting a hold of that stuff.
Right. Yeah. I'm from a development standpoint, we get a ton of resources around like, how do I implement whatever, like in a certain way. And we have Stack Exchange and all sorts of things where we can share code with each other, like in an open source way. It might be interesting to create something where hospitals can exchange can share procedures and talk about it. I don't, again, I better than I do on that.
and yeah, I think that there are might actually be a couple resources out there already, which I can send your way. And so those are kind of areas where we might try and see if we can find something.
Okay. It'd be great to look at that and just see, again, trying to come up with ideas to help. So yeah, well, would love to take a look at it. We can link that in underneath this video or wherever we post.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Ben, I know we're at about time that we had scheduled, and I know you are super busy right now. So I really, really appreciate your time and don't want to take up any more of it than need be. But do you have any parting thoughts, ideas, things like that?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I think we talked about a lot, and I think there's definitely some tall orders for, for folks in your field now and in the future. So, I appreciate, you guys looking at it, and anything you guys can do to help, that'd be awesome.
We're gonna do our best.
All right.
Well, yeah, thanks so much. And I'll get all the resources from you, and we can share them with the teams.
Okay, great.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate
All right,
it.
thank you.
Cool. So that was our medical track. So who you just heard from was Dr. Daphne Owen, Dr. Nirav Seeth, and Benjamin Kelowna. Some really good perspectives working in different areas of the medical field. It was awesome talking to all three of them, and really appreciate their time. There's already, we're kind of seeing some stuff in Slack where teams are getting hooked up together. There seems to be a lot of interest in obviously the medical response to this. So we're hoping to see some really good things there. We have it looks like we have 3 or 4 teams at least right now, like just working on that. So the next set of videos that I wanted to show was that was in education, and so we're working with a nonprofit organization called Early Learning Lab, and building out we really quickly in a matter of 2 weeks, almost like an extended hackathon, working to build a resource center for people who are now 100% responsible for educating their children 0 through 5 years old. And so in part this hackathon was actually kind of inspired by the project that we're doing with them. So without further ado, I'll start playing the interview that I did with them. This was our only 2-person interview, so I thought that was pretty interesting. So I am here with Liz and Chital from Early Learning Lab. I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Sure. I'm Chital Singh. I'm the executive director of the Early Learning Lab. We are an innovation lab for the early childhood field. So we try to find technology and innovation solutions to make lives easier and better for parents of children prenatal to 5.
I am Liz. I am the product manager for the Early Learning Lab, and I am working on helping build technologies and build tools to bridge the gaps between early childhood education and the technology world.
Yeah, and just full disclosure to everybody, my company Yeti is working with Early Learning Lab, and we have actually specifically been working on an application that would help educate people who've all of a sudden been put in a position where they have children at home and are isolated and need materials for them. So in some part, our work doing that has inspired some of the work that we're doing on this hackathon too. So it's been great working with you all. But what I want to talk about today is for other ideas and other things that can happen, that the teams at this hackathon can work on. What are some of the problems that we're seeing that this crisis has caused?
Sure. Can I jump in, Liz?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. So as I mentioned, we at the Early Learning Lab, we focus on parents of children 0 to 5. So that's, infant, toddler, preschool range. But I have also been involved with a number of K-12 organizations, especially K-12 family engagement organizations. And family engagement is basically this big umbrella of how we improve the way that parents and teachers work together. And what has jumped out at me from being in all of these other calls with the K-12 education people is that we actually have it a lot easier in the early education field, because we as a field have done a lot of work because children tend to be in lots of really different places in those first 5 years. Some of them go to preschool, some of them are taken care of by a nanny, some of them are at home with a parent. We've done a lot of work as a field to identify some very simple frameworks for what a child needs to be what we call kindergarten ready, or ready to enter school, the school system, by the age of 5. Now, K-12, obviously, these are older children, and it gets a lot more complicated as we grow up, as we all know from our own schooling. And so what has really jumped out at me is, yes, it's hard to educate a young child at home, but not as hard as it is to educate a 4th grader who needs to be ready for 5th grade next year and needs to make sure that she has gotten to the place in the math curriculum where she was supposed to be before everything shut down. And I also am speaking from experience as a parent of elementary school, an elementary and a middle school kid, and have been on the receiving end of a lot of information from schools that is very hard to process. And so I had an idea for a way to take advantage of something that's coming up, normally a time of celebration for children and hopefully their families, summer vacation. I think summer vacation is going to look a lot different this year. And there's so much concern about, even in normal times, what we call a summer slide, which is children get up to the end of the school year. They are hopefully at grade level with various standards. And we are lucky because we have Common Core standards in our country. So we know generally where children should be with English language arts. Liz knows this because she's a teacher, and math, or she used to be a teacher, sorry. And we even have science standards. But so we know where children should be by the end of a grade year. In normal times, there's always concern with what we call the summer slide. Over summer vacation, children lose a little bit and they have to kind of get up to speed again in the fall. This year, summer might be an opportunity for some catch up. And so I've been thinking a lot about standards are out there. We know where children should be at the end of every grade level across multiple subjects. The information is out there online for families to digest. What if there was an easy way to simplify that information provided to families so that they are able to construct at their own pace a learning curriculum for their child to make sure that they're getting their kid up to where they need to be to start the next school year, which hopefully will happen in the fall.
Yeah. Well, that would be awesome. And I know Early Learning Lab has created a lot of material, and would love to follow up with you on like where we can maybe, some links to that we can share with some of the teams too.
Definitely. And as part of the app that we're building with Yeti, and Yeti is fantastic, everyone.
Thank you.
Plug there. We took that same approach to our app. So yes, we are compiling resources that are available on the web, but there's also a whole section to what we're building that is really, again, about that simple framework. So parents don't need to be driven crazy with a list of 200 things you should be doing with your child right now. Go. We always took the approach of what is a very simple framework that you could hold in your head that just shows parents how to support the healthy development and education of their young children.
And I think that's one of the biggest struggles right now is I think parents feel like they're drinking from a fire hose or they have no information. There's no like middle ground. Either you're getting just bombarded with tons of information. It's really hard to tell what's good and what's bad and what's like what you actually need to be doing with your child versus what you should be doing, and how to balance all of these different worlds that people are living in, and all of the like access to resources and things like that as well. It's really important to keep things simple and accessible for everybody. That's really the key in my mind. Is if we're trying to do too much, nothing is going to get accomplished.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think just to speak to accessibility again, I'm sorry, Tony, I would just also say that we, in the way that we constructed a lot of the activities and the resource we're building, we were conscious of the fact that in a lot of homes, there might be multiple people sharing one or two phones. So I know this is a hackathon, but as much as we can give people things that they could be doing with their children offline to support that, I think it will be easier for some families.
Yeah. Well, what stands out to me with what you're saying is, and I actually had a really good conversation with my mother, who's a second grade teacher, last night, is that there's just a lot of information all coming at them right now. And so we have some really talented designers that are going to be a part of this. And so hopefully, somebody, it's a big design challenge, really. Like, how can we make this intuitive and easy for people to understand? There's a ton of resources out there, but how do we make that easily consumable? Because there's a lot of noise right now out there.
And so I don't think this is just a current time problem, but I think one of the issues in education that there are a number of communities that are trying to address is the gap between school and community, and being able to have learning not just something that happens in school, but also follows kids out into their community, out into when they're spending time with their parents, their grandparents, at church, wherever they are, building in frameworks for helping students across all of those communities. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there are a number of school districts, smaller schools that are piloting programs around a more community-based learning. And I think that this is a really good opportunity to get parents to not feel like, okay, that's school's job. That this is now something like, okay, this is something that school does, but we can pick up parts of it. And there are things that happen at school there, and how do we help support that full community to growing children?
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly interesting point. So yeah, I mean, I'm structuring a lot of these short term, medium term, long term. I mean, but yeah, looking at the long term perspective of this, I mean, it's, school has educated, but I mean, education doesn't end, right? And so, maybe this is an opportunity for us to really, rethink how education happens, and, make it more part of a community. And I mean, I don't know how software is necessarily going to do that, but that is an interesting, really, it's an interesting challenge to think about, for sure. There's roles that schools and teachers fill right now that are now kind of forced upon parents. I'm wondering, there's also just the interactivity that kids have and stuff like that. I mean, how are young kids interacting with each other right now outside of, are they doing Zoom calls? Are they doing what? Yeah, I don't have kids, so
I think as young as infants are doing Zoom calls right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking there could be an opportunity for just maybe a more unique, fun way to have kids interact that is somehow educational. I mean, maybe it's a sort of some kind of a game. I'm thinking,
one of my good friends is teaching 8th grade, and her homeroom class is a dual language learner class. And so all of her students are non-native English speakers in that class. and they have been one day a week is like games day in their class, and they've been playing code names.
Okay, cool.
And so that's a really good game for English language learners, because they have to think about like grouping categories of words and things like that, and how to describe things to one another. So she's done her best to try to integrate games into the classroom, as part, like working towards a learning goal.
So I want to I think we were going down a path that was pretty interesting, which was the community based, and I think this is looking more kind of long-term effects of this, the community based aspect, bringing some of that from school into back into the homes, and I'm wondering, I don't know, could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on your thoughts on what's going on there in the long term, what we might be looking at?
Do you want to take that, Liz, or do you want me to?
Why don't you take it and then I'll follow up?
Sure. So yeah, we do a lot of work with people who are trying to bridge that school-home connection. And there are tools and technologies and software that people have built, whether they're applications that allow for better communication from teachers to parents, texting programs. There are platforms out there. I think one of the challenges that would be worth addressing now, that will also be a long-term challenge, is, again, it kind of gets to what I was saying about, there's a lot of acknowledgement that parents have a lot of other things that they're doing. And so wanting to be respectful of the parent's time. So when a teacher is asking a parent to do something with their child at home, if there was a way that it's reinforcing or supporting what they're learning at school, it's kind of a better use of everyone's time, and those lessons are being reinforced in a really holistic, comprehensive way. And so I've seen this happen in wonderful ways with a lot of in-person sharing of parent-teacher conferences, where the teachers are able to, again, digest all of this, the year-long curriculum, into some core skills that the child needs by the end of the year, and then resources for the parent on how to help them get there. And so that's what I've seen done, and I think it's really successful when it works well. And it would be great if there was some software solution that was able to replicate that experience.
Very cool. So it's kind of the like a synopsis and an outline of what students are going to be learning, and then maybe reinforcing skills that parents can work on with their kids to follow the curriculum that the teacher's getting through.
Yeah, and there are resources that I think could help the developers that summarize those skills that I'm happy to share in the Slack channel. But one of them was actually a project that I worked on when I was at another organization. I haven't asked their permission to share this, but the organization was called Great Schools, and the project, we did what we call milestone videos. So they're actually minute-long, short videos that show parents where a child needs to be by the end of each grade. And it's mostly elementary school, but in math, reading, and writing. And the idea was you see a teacher working with the child, and so the parent is able to just quickly understand what the standards as they're written are a little opaque, the Common Core standards.
That's an understatement.
The videos really just help illustrate, well, what does this actually mean when a 7-year-old is reading with fluency? What does it look like? Or what does the math look like? So that is a resource that could be really helpful. And then the people who put together, there's a website called corestandards.org that actually lists the standards, and that might be helpful, or it could be broken down in a way that's more accessible for parents as well.
Awesome. Oh yeah, we'll try to generate all those links and
Sure.
Yeah, it's also about how to like connect those skills and not have it be like homework. Is also, I think that parents don't want to come home and like have to drill their kids on math facts. That's not the quality time that they want to be spending with their children. And so it's making it, there are ways of connecting like the real world application of skills into day-to-day life, and not only like tricks on reading with fluency, like, okay, like reading to your kids, like how do you bridge that into like, okay, when I'm cooking in the kitchen, I actually just read all of the recipes out loud so that my kids can hear me reading this as I'm doing it, but just figuring out how to make those skills more approachable for parents, because the way they are written as standards, they're not approachable for teachers. They're certainly not going to be approachable for parents. There are many more things between the beginning and end of education that really do apply, and that we as adults use every day in our world, and bringing that into the child's world as well.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, it sounds like a lot of what we're talking about is actually tools for parents to be able to help educate their kids at home.
Yeah,
this and long term. So.
And as we talk about this community approach, I think parents feel really isolated right now. Yeah, they're all getting the same information, but they're not getting this. I mean, we're really focused on trying to support child learning and not parent and caregiver teaching. It's much, we just kind of assume that if we throw things at them, they can handle it. But there isn't that support network and support tools as much for parents to build that community. And especially in communities where parents are used to having a wide social, I mean, so are children, but a wide social network that they can rely on to help with those things. And being able to connect those through tools and utilize their social network that they're isolated from right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point too, is like, I mean, I imagine a lot of parents get a lot of information just even through osmosis while picking up their kid, talking with another parent, doing those sorts of things. And, that is probably really helpful from a community standpoint, and is not something that is necessarily just easily happening right now,
right,
without a tool to facilitate it.
We've spoken about the importance of exchanging information about the child between the teacher and the parent, but tools that actually just help build that relationship, because there is a relationship there. And it's a powerful one. And, it's even just watching my daughter who, is happy to not be going to school, but the way that she looks forward to seeing her teacher, it makes me feel really close to her teacher too. So it's kind of a triangle effect there, but it's a really powerful relationship that we don't acknowledge enough, I think.
Is there I guess any closing thoughts? One thing for me, my mom would always say it takes a village. And, right now it feels that we're, not really able to have that village, and so I think, for doing our part as software developers to try to facilitate that with the tools that we create is important.
I think that's a great summary of this conversation.
Awesome. Well, I'll have to thank my mom for constantly saying that.
Yeah, it's really important to make sure that we're using the resources that we have and existed before this and will exist in the future, to make sure that kids aren't getting left behind because of this. and really coming back to those standards and those skills that we need kids to learn by a certain period of time, and how we leverage the community and the and technology to get kids there and to get every kid there.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll be following up with like resources and things.
All right.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
All right. So that was our education track. We only had one video, but we got two people in there. So that's we're specifically in that, obviously looking at early learning. There are all sorts of things to do as far as like higher education too. So we might see some things there. I think a lot of this actually, what I found interesting was it kind of ties into the health and wellness that track that we'll start talking about later. There, a lot of this is just people, kids being at home, families being at home together and figuring out this new dynamic and how we bring in other people. So it's, I think there's a ton of software that can be built to help facilitate that. We're obviously doing a lot of stuff over Zoom now, but there's other options that we can develop. All right, so the next track that we had is the small business track. And so in this, I talked with Denise Tran, the owner of Bun Me in San Francisco, who, as you've heard, a lot of restaurants are hurting. So we'll kind of talk about some of the things going on there and how we see ourselves come out of that. And then there's, and then I talked with Mike Simonson, who's the president of EO San Francisco. And, just generally that's more of an ideation session, really. Lots of different ideas for businesses, that we might be able to get started in this hackathon, but, it could really become businesses as we start, start moving forward from this. So without further ado, here's Denise and then Mike. All right, cool. Well, I am with Denise Tran, the owner of Bun Me, restaurant in San Francisco. And we're going to be talking today, specifically in the small business track about, the effect on restaurants and stuff. And so, Denise, thank you for being with me on this. I guess if there's anything else you'd like to add as far as an introduction, please do.
No, that's good. Thank you for having me. I look forward to speaking to your audience and what's going on with the restaurant industry, especially from just my personal experience.
Cool. Well, yeah, I know, everything we've been hearing, from the, just from the news and stuff, I know that it's a hard time to be a restaurant owner, for sure. But would love to, just kind of see, hear from you, like what some of the main problems are that you're seeing, and generally if you have any insights around food, because I know that there's there's this big shift in to groceries and we hear about farmers dumping milk and stuff like that. So we'd just love to get, some of your thoughts about what is currently happening right now.
Well, currently what's happening is there's nothing happening. That is the biggest problem. And everything is happening at such a fast pace. Well, not now, but when just the initial shelter in place order got instituted, we just, the first week or 2 weeks of that, it was a really stressful time for us. We have 4 locations in the city, 2 being at the airport and 2 in San Francisco. And we just one by one had to shut each and every one down. We staggered our closings. So that was a really difficult time as far as making just quick decisions on, on hiring, firing, how to, obviously preserve our cash, speaking to our vendors, our landlords, just having these really tough conversations about the reality of what's happening. I mean, we saw a 90% drop in sales overnight, literally like from, overnight. So we just had there wasn't a lead up to it. So just in terms of our response to it, had to be quick. And that was, it was such a stressful time. Right now we're managing cash flow, just watching our cash carefully, changing the way that we operate in the stores, or in our store, looking to, keep our employees safe, but also keep our customers safe. And so operationally, we've had to change how we do business.
Yeah.
And just keep watching the news like everyone else and trying to figure out, when is it safe for us to open,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is, it's, as a business owner, and knowing a lot of other business owners, like something like 90% hit is just crazy. And for people listening to this and watching this, like, you expect a slowdown, maybe 30%, something like that, but like 90, 100, like 100%, which is a lot of what these restaurants, like what your restaurant and other restaurants are seeing. I mean, that is just, you never plan for that. There's no way to. So, and that you're going out there and you're, donating even still, to some of these first responders. Like, I mean, just thank you, like that's awesome. Like,
yeah, we started a GoFundMe page and folks have been donating money to help us in the effort. So it's been really good. And it's the, it's what keeps, some positivity, something to look forward to, and being able to help others. And it gives us something to do because our sales are down. So we're open, but it gives us like something to look forward to as well.
Yeah. And so as far as like, I know that there's a lot of like delivery options and things like that, and so this is like a software specific, hackathon that we're working on. So what, like, as an owner of a restaurant, like what is the ways in which you're able to get customers and get revenue right now? Is it like exclusively through like Uber Eats and Caviar? Like what's that look like? What's that picture kind of look like, I guess?
Right. I mean, our relationship with third-party apps is a love and hate relationship. It's challenging, and I don't think that I'm alone in feeling this. It's one of those relationships where we've just seen over the years, customers that have gone directly to us would now, get to us through an Uber Eats or a Caviar app, and there's so many of them out there, and so they're definitely driving so much of the business through to their apps, right? And so then we're seeing our customers, but now there's a middleman, and now we're paying upwards of 25 to 30%, right, for the same customer, and that is extremely expensive. And during a time when sales were great and and volume is high, some of it is justifiable. We were able to have to have that relationship and have it work, even though it's not ideal, obviously, for us. However, in this climate, it just is not a viable model,
right?
Because the volume is not there, and and we just but then, our customers have gotten accustomed to, to reaching us through these apps, that the times have changed, but I think the habit of reaching us through the apps is still there. And so, so then the question is, how do we engage with our customer and either bring them back either with our own app, or is there a better model here, something in between where we could, still have a platform that they can go through, but there's a better business model, because right now it's just the current business model and the commission structure that they have is not working. It's not working. And I think that restaurants are suffering because they don't feel like they have any other options. And there's, as far as anything that's more cost effective, to get to our customers. And so, so that it is it is a challenge, and it's something that I think the industry has been looking at really closely, just the relationship of restaurants to these third-party apps and what's the best way to go about doing that.
Yeah.
Aside from every restaurant just having their own ordering app, right?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, again, this is a hackathon, so it might be interesting to I don't know, people to explore that. It sounds like it's really a business model innovation that would need to happen, because, figuring out the delivery, but how to, honestly make food delivery affordable. Because if this continues, you're going to need to increase your prices, right? I mean, there's no way. And so how can, maybe there be a more a way for people to more directly purchase meals from the restaurants they love to help support them more,
Right.
So that could be an interesting thing to do. I guess so that's short term, and I mean I'm glad that you still have a place open, a spot open. So I mean, looking at coming out of this, have you received any guidance, or is there any kind of conversations happening in the restaurant industry around how does it start? How do things start opening up, and how does this how does this look? Maybe who knows what the time frame is? 2 months, 3 months, next week if you're in Georgia, but
I guess, I mean, any guidance that we're getting, we're seeking it out ourselves, obviously. All that I know is just figuring out operationally, what do we need to do to change our operations so that we can open in a safe manner and protect everyone involved. Are there ordering kiosks that we, put in place that customers are ordering themselves and there's just very little interaction with employees? I mean, how are we, and then how are we engaging with our customers? We're taking only phone orders, we're only taking online orders, so people aren't even coming to the restaurant to order. And moving forward in the future, I mean, obviously I don't see that. I mean, I'd like that to change, when this is over, but at this point, it's looking at, we don't know how long. Like, we're thinking a year plus. I mean, how long do we need to change how we do business so that we are mindful of COVID, right? And whether some of these patterns just end up staying because it makes more sense moving forward. Main priority is minimizing labor, as always, and making things more efficient. And now more than ever, just because the numbers aren't going to be there for us. So we just have to be really efficient in our inventorying, our ordering, our, in our labor management more so than ever.
Yeah.
Watching that bottom line is really important now, and because it gets down to our viability, so but to kind of answer your, I'm at a loss like everyone else as far as like what that is and how that looks like when we open.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like guidance on it is very scattered right now, or just non-existent. And so, I mean, there could be an opportunity for, there to be just resources. Cause I mean, the restaurant industry employs so many people and it's like everywhere. And, I think a lot of people are going to be very surprised when, we're told that we can go outside again and go to businesses, and there's a lot of restaurants that are just not open anymore. A lot of their favorite restaurants and things like that, and so it's, so I think just, just some guidance maybe to restaurant owners and things like that around how this is happening. And then even people hey, what restaurants are open? Where can I go? What can
Right. I mean, I think that's all a good point. I mean, at this point, there's a lot of the landscape has changed so much as far as like who is still. I mean, I read an article that it's expected that 20 to 25% of restaurants are going to just completely go out of business. Right. They're not going to be here anymore because they can't survive. So then it's the whole. The education to the public as far as like it's safe to go take out food, where can they go to get it? Who's still open? Who's complying with COVID, or maybe there's like an understanding of like, okay, well, Banh Mi is like, it's 5-star because they've done all these things that are in compliance and it's safe to eat there versus somewhere else, or that, Banh Mi's still around and this restaurant is not around, because there's a lot of just, like I said, the market landscape is going to be changing so quickly as far as who is still in business or not. So I think just like you said, informing the public and getting that information out is huge. And also on the back end of just hiring, employment and restaurant staff. I mean, if 20% of restaurants are going to go out of business, that's a lot of people that are not working. And so like, how do you connect them with, restaurateurs that are still hiring or still looking for good talent because they're open?
Yeah.
Is there some way to kind of, connect with them as well in a different way? It's all interesting to think about.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good point. I wanted to jump into as well. It's like, I mean, there's, taking a hit like you did. I mean, there's just no way to keep people hired. And so that's why we're seeing like these like big unemployment numbers. And so, I mean, like there's a workforce out there, that, how do they get engaged? How do they make money? How do they, do stuff? And like, I think that there's, I don't know if it's necessarily software, but it could be, some way of connecting those people with jobs that need to be done, and
right. And I think it's a great opportunity for restaurants that are still in business to up their talent, because for the longest time, unemployment rates were so low that, you almost, it was an employee's market, right? And so you were, you were just, as long as you could show up and do the work, you're hired, Mm-hmm. And so in this environment, it's a good opportunity for restaurants that are still open and still viable to be able to grab some, better talent out there. And how do you find them?
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if there is even just like a restaurant specific, job board type of thing. Like I don't know how you typically would hire somebody. But if there's a might be helpful to have like a restaurant specific one. I don't know, just thinking of ideas. One of the things I wanted to ask you about was the food supply, because I thought you might have some insight there. And what we're hearing is that there's like lack of supply for grocery stores, but then there's the farmers that have had excess supply and that they're like just getting rid of and disposing of because it was supposed to go to restaurants. I mean software is uniquely suited to kind of help manage supply and demand, and so I'm wondering just what you've seen there and how. Just curious, really.
I read about that too in a few articles, and we haven't heard anything from our end, from our suppliers, that was happening. I imagine that's probably in a scenario where you're, connecting with a lot of smaller farms and a lot of, smaller food suppliers, or farmers. Yeah. I can only share our pain points, right, and what we're looking at, and that is that when do we open? How do we open? How are we profitable, or can we be profitable in this new normal where there's so many COVID restrictions, and what can we do? What is out there that can make us more efficient and operate more efficiently in this landscape, right? And from an operational standpoint, it's like, from a safety standpoint, that's the most important thing that we're looking at. And also, being as efficient as possible and connecting to our customers in an efficient manner that's not going to cost us, 30% of a dollar is a huge issue for us. So how do we come up with ways to deliver our product to our customers efficiently and less, and cost effectively in this time, right? Where when people can't come into the restaurant anymore, or it's very minimal, and there's so many restaurants like myself in this position, do we not open for a year and a half? That's not viable.
Right.
But then if we do open, how are we viable in that scenario, given all that's going on? It's a really tough dilemma, right? And I still don't know all the answers. So that's really challenging. And I definitely want customers to know that we're open and all the things that we're doing to be healthy and safe and keeping, being very mindful of COVID requirements. And we want our customers to know that we're not able to reach them all outside of our social media, and our website. But is there something else? Is there something where, customers are able to get that information so that they know, that we are? I mean, so getting information out to customers, operating safely, and efficiently and cost effectively, and when can we do that? And all of those are our main concerns right now.
Yeah. Well, that's a great prompt. I think that this whole hackathon is about just ideating and starting to prototype out ideas. So hopefully people can take that and run with it and, make something to help, because I feel for you. It's a rough situation. As a customer, what's the best way to support your local restaurants right now?
As a customer, the best way to support local restaurants is ordering directly through them, ordering food like you would normally, because it's safe, it's okay, to do that, and doing it, pick up curbside, if you can. Like that would really help all of us out.
Me and my wife will be doing that for dinner tonight. And thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate it. And more power to you for fighting through this and doing so with kids on the phone with me too. So
thank you, Tony.
Okay, thank you, Denise. So I have Mike Simonson here. I'll let you introduce yourself, Mike.
Hi, I'm Mike Simonson. I am the CEO, founder of a company called Altos Research. We are a data company. We do real estate data, analyze the U.S. housing market, and do all the supply and demand analytics and bubble that information up to people who care. I am also the president of the Entrepreneurs Organization of San Francisco, which EO is a global network of 15,000 members around the world, people who own businesses of at least $1 million in revenue. And there's 100 of us in the San Francisco chapter, and which is how I know Tony.
Right on. Yeah. And so, we're bringing Mike in to talk specifically just about the small business impact. What is going on with small businesses. We, been hearing in the news that there's, small businesses are really affected by this. The federal government is spending billions and billions of dollars to try to support small businesses. We thought it would be interesting as a part of this hackathon to bring in that perspective and hopefully try to come up with some solutions to, what we can do to help some of these small business owners. Well, and so what I want to talk about with you as a part of this is like, what are some of the things that we're seeing as we come out of this as far as a response, short term, medium term, and long term. And, really, I know just, being in EO and talking to people, I know you mentioned tourism, you mentioned, people that are importing, exporting. I know restaurants obviously have been hurting like a lot in this. And so, I think from a hackathon and a software perspective, it would be interesting to just to talk with you about, maybe what are some of the things that, some of these small businesses need to, as they start coming out of this. Because what we're seeing also is, it's not like, as you mentioned, the new normal, it's not like we're all just going to all of a sudden go back and start going to restaurants like we were in February,
Right.
So yeah, I guess, what are maybe like maybe we can talk about some of the specific things people are struggling with in those types of businesses right now, and then we can come up with maybe think of some ideas.
Yeah. So, a few things along the way. Let's start in my domain, which is real estate. So we sell to the institutional data side, the real estate industry. These are people who are doing mortgages and, own property and they have exposure to the U.S. real estate market. And we also sell to the individual realtors along the way. In the data, there's a surprising trend of how much is actually getting done. These are how do you sell a house now? Well, it turns out I was talking to a client the other day, and it's we're going to list a new house. And, this is a person who just had 2 hip surgeries, and the master bedroom is on the 2nd floor. And they need a single-story house. They gotta buy a house, and so they're selling a house and they're buying a house, and those types of things are they have to happen. The commerce finds a way to happen, and so but at the same time you can't go visit open homes. So what are the implications there? We know that virtual tours are skyrocketing. So there are other dynamics going on. There's this whole dynamic of there's a bunch of really highly funded SoftBank Capital type companies that were out there buying houses and buying them online, Click, and those guys shut those businesses off immediately because they can't be stuck with a bunch of houses on their books. And so all of a sudden, there's in some markets where they were really active, 10% of the demand just evaporated overnight. So what does it happen there? I was surprised that some of the real estate got deemed to be critical or necessary businesses. But then as you go, you're oh, I see why it's critical. Right? People have to do these things, and so the commerce finds a way to happen. Yeah. Switching to
so just to before you switch really quick, I guess one of the things that what I'm hearing from you right there is there's just ways of helping enable remote remote whatever we used to do before this all happened, but whether it be real estate or any sort of thing. And I mean, obviously there's a lot of businesses, like Zoom. I mean, the stock is going through the roof. But
you know what, even then, Tony, Zoom, like, those problems are not done. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot to solve there.
Right.
And like, it Zoom works because it finally, like, Zoom is the first one that works. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
I did a WebEx call today, and it's horrible. The experience, the video and the audio quality and the noises. Somebody's dialed in on the phone and the background, like, it's horrible. That experience, and Zoom is like just not horrible anymore. Like, there's tons of opportunity to go there.
Well, and it might be even just like things like specialty video sharing platforms and things like that could be really interesting too.
Yeah. So we're doing an EO event next week where we've got a lecturer in from Singularity University, and he's a big thinker, and it's about, crafting the future, and it's a strategic framework. And we were going to do it in person, this big workshop. We're now doing it virtual, but we're going to do breakout rooms. And so, you do breakout rooms for small groups, or, we have a negotiation seminar coming up, and you do want to do breakout to, one-on-one. And Zoom is pretty good at that stuff. But you could imagine, a real learning platform that like, there's all kinds of things to solve in there.
Yeah. Well, and so there might be some cool web RTC hack or something that people could do with it.
Yeah, for sure. My girlfriend, my partner, is a DJ, and have you seen her? You might have seen her play. They've been streaming, right? All the DJs are streaming. Yeah, because you can't play in clubs anymore, and they're using Twitch, and so they've got, and we're not gamers, but so, like, she's hacking like this open source streaming platform, and she's pulling all this stuff together, and it works because there's been a gazillion gamers going, and the sync works well, and the bandwidth is good. But man, the setup on that is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And so like there's a ton to solve in that environment.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody, I did read an article about people hosting like nightclub, like Zoom nightclub, club quarantine,
exactly.
Like
well, and that's the other thing. So Twitch, you're streaming out. You got multi cameras, right? So you got her on the CDJs, and there's one on her, and you can, but then we've got another call going with all our friends. That's the Zoom, so you can hang out with people and dance. It's less like the gaming, watch the one cool gamer play, and more like, how do you have the party? So like, and then she's literally setting it up. So in the Twitch stream, she's embedding her Zoom screen so that you can see yourself. Like, it's like there's infinite problems to solve there.
Yeah, well, it's like, I mean, we also are going to be talking to people just about like emotional health. And I mean, like, entertainment in this point in time when we're all stuck in our boxes, like is big, so it would be awesome to see some hacks on just, how are DJs going to do?
Exactly. And there's a little bit, the group she plays with, the Space Cowboys in San Francisco, throws some big parties here, and like they're fun, but so they've been raising money, a lot of money for first responders, or Meals on Wheels, or whatever it needs to happen, and they're raising a ton of money. But there are some of those DJs who they need to make a living too, like that's their if that's your full-time gig, like there's a lot of commerce like that to get enabled. You can put a tip jar out, but like there's some better ways to do that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Well, and all that needs to be invented, so that'd be cool if people want to play with that. That's a fun.
That's right. DJ tip jar.
Play with it. Yeah. The online DJ tip jar. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, so shifting back, I guess, to more, I mean, so there's, the entertainment aspect for sure. I mean, like, there's a bunch of delivery stuff out there for restaurants and things like that. Um, you know,
Yeah, those are tricky too, though, right? Because they're not a good deal for the restaurants.
yeah,
Like the existing infrastructure is like, it's like restaurants do it because you got to get, you can't, you have to exist in that space. But whatever, they take 30% of your revenue and you can't adjust your prices for it. Like it sure seems like there's a lot to be solved there too.
yeah. I mean, maybe like, because they are a little bit held hostage by that stuff. And I know that they're doing $0 delivery fees and things like that on a lot of this stuff. But I mean, even maybe to help out some of these restaurants get through this is, an easy way to facilitate takeout, like
Yep.
for restaurants or something or something like that.
Or could you imagine a world where you take like uh, the airline pricing algorithms, which are like, they super sophisticated and seat and pricing algorithms, and you apply some of that math to the new seating uh, world. Like when there's a time we can get back into a restaurant, now the restaurant is going to have 1/6 its seating capacity. Um, but maybe I'm willing to pay $100 for a table
because I haven't been
just
to
for
the
the table.
restaurant and
Yeah, just for the table.
yeah.
And like, and I'm willing to pay that because, like all of a sudden there's not 100 seats in the room, there's only 16, and so I understand, like, and it's, and, we, like, maybe there's that kind of assistance that could happen.
Yeah, I mean, like the restaurants are going to be looking for a lot of things. I mean, I know we have members in our chapter. It is just, it's, just crazy. You never, as a business owner, expect your revenue to just go to zero overnight.
Go to zero. Yeah.
Like, and so, when it got expenses and rent and all that stuff. So, they definitely need a lot of help, and you mentioned tourism. I mean, I don't know, even, I don't know, something for tour companies to be able to somehow, export maybe their information. People are going to want to be able to go on tours, like,
Yeah.
At home, like, so there could be something there too.
There could be something there. I know, I do have a friend who does the Airbnb experiences, and they my friend in San Francisco has some friends in Italy, and grandma does a pasta making. You go to Italy and you do pasta making with grandma, and she's this mega Airbnb destination, and it's super fun. And and so my friend here switched grandma to be online cooking class, and is booking a ton.
Wow.
And so literally grandma's booking online cooking class, and just doing them. And like, that was because the Airbnb experience was her livelihood before, like the whole family,
Right. Well, and just
Um,
imagine how many chefs at these restaurants and stuff have, aren't working right now. I mean, it could be, maybe it's the time to build something that connects chefs to people at their home and helps them out. I mean, I could use it,
Yeah, that's right. You've hit the limit of your cooking creativity.
Yeah, I think I've pretty much made all the dishes that I know how to make, So, yeah, definitely gotta explore a little more there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So I think, well, this is super fun. I mean, talking about a bunch of ideas. So I think we've kind of talked short term. We're talking like midterm, long term. I mean, us coming out of this, like, what do we like? I mean, what are you hearing members saying? Like thinking about? I know I know one of the things that I'm hearing a whole bunch of questions about is like all this tax stuff that's going, or not tax stuff, but like all this government program stuff going on. Like, you know, I mean, maybe there's something.
Yeah, that's real interesting. I hadn't thought about the government program things in terms of business opportunity, but I tell you what, man, there was a whole bunch of banks who screwed up really bad. You know, you've got the SBA is this existing program which works well, and you get loans, small business loans, and so you know, like that's fine. And some of the big banks then, you know, are equipped to go handle applications to for you get this stimulus program, PPP, the payroll protection or payroll, whatever it's called, and to help you pay for the you know, for people that might have been laid off, right? And they or salaries cut. And so then people go to apply for it, and all of the systems fall over. And you can imagine, you know all the big government rollouts of any system. Like, it's really hard to build a system that scales to its mega, you know, on day one, and not fall over. And you don't have a second chance. But in this case, it's like, you know, every bank, every neighborhood bank, and you know I had to do a fast change because my bank, like, that Friday morning said, sorry, we're not going to do it for you because you don't already have debt with us. And so I had to find a new bank, get a new bank, and then apply through them. And they, that's all manual all the way through, right? All the way through. And I think that it probably, although we haven't gotten any loan yet, it probably worked because the person that I happened to talk to was diligent enough to, you know, hand walk a bunch of paper through a process. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of problems to be solved there. And I'm sure lots of, you know, banks and thinking about their different banking relationships.
Yeah.
Got some new ideas there.
Yeah, I mean, I just know, I know personally, a lot of the business owners I know are just been taking out debt, like, you know, to try to just get through this. And that's pretty, like, a pretty global, like, or I mean, at least nationwide thing right now. And so, I mean, there's gonna probably be a lot of ways just to, you know, try to help people figure out, because part of these government stimulus programs are going to get, you know, forgiven. They're going to forgive some of the debt, some of it's not. So it's like, I mean, there's a lot, you know, as business owners, like, we're supposed to know, we're supposed to know, like, what we're getting into. A lot of people have no idea what they're getting into. So
no idea.
To be some help, like, you know, help, you know, clarifying this. I mean, mom and pop, like, coffee shops and stuff like that. Like, you know,
yeah, like you borrow $100,000 on this program, and if it's sitting in this account on your books, you don't have to pay it back. If it's sitting in this one, you do. How do you know, you know, right, how do you know it's in the right account?
It's definitely a big source of frustration and confusion and honestly fear for a lot of people in the small business community right now. I know that. Mike, well, I know you're a busy guy. I know you've, you know, I want to be respectful of your time. Do you have anything else that you know, you think we should be just considering, or maybe ideas for you know, different hacks people can do?
You know, I'm sure if we kept talking, we could keep finding them.
Oh yeah, we could probably have 100 ideas at a time. That's the nature of EO, right?
That's right. I'm looking forward to seeing the output of the process. It's really exciting.
Cool.
And if anybody's doing, you know, real estate related things, and they need some data on the fly, let me know, and we can open an API for them.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, we'll get some resources and stuff from you, and yeah, make sure to share that out.
That'd be great.
Cool. Well, thanks, Mike. Really appreciate your time.
You bet, Tony.
And yeah, this was a lot of fun and very informative. I hope some people make some cool stuff.
Looking forward to seeing what happens.
All right, so that was our small business track. Just a bit of an update. We've got, I think, about 6 or 7 teams that are formed already. We've still got a bunch of people on here that are a bunch of individuals that we're trying to get together. So if you're watching this, please reach out to Madeline or Rudy or myself, and we'll help get you on the right team with your skill sets. And then we've got a bunch of mentors hanging out in the Slack channel as well. So feel free to jump in there. The last track, I got two people that I spoke with. It's in the health and wellness space. And so, all of the other things that we've been hearing may or may not have been affecting you. The medical response, obviously, if we're home and healthy, we're not really seeing a lot of that unless we have family members and friends that have had to go into the hospital. Education, unless you have small kids, you're probably not seeing, really seeing that. The small business, that seems a little bit at arm's length for a lot of people at home. But this next category and the last category, health and wellness, really affects all of us. And so it's, hey, we're going through a very, very unique time right now where we're all isolated. We're not out and about doing the things that we typically do. And so we thought it would be really important to include some people that have really good experience here. Two people, Dr. Lisa Oldson, who specializes in obesity, but also just nutrition and helping, people stay healthy. And then also Dr. Deborah Rosman, who is the president and CEO of HeartMath, and does a ton of work with managing stress and ways in which to do that. And also treating PTSD, which I think is another, and you'll hear us talk about it a little bit more, but something that, the people in the medical profession on the front lines are experiencing trauma right now, with a lot of people dying around them. And so there's going to be some things that we need to do as a society to reduce our stress and, start moving forward that way. So anyway, without further ado, first we got Dr. Lisa, and then Dr. Debbie Rosman too. All right. So I am with Dr. Lisa Oldson. We actually talked before and recorded this, but mistake on our end. We didn't actually record the audio. So we're having a follow-up conversation. I really appreciate you doing this. Well, I'll let you further introduce yourself.
Introduce? Yeah. Sure, sounds good. Well, great to be back, even though it was inadvertent. So I'm Lisa Oldson. I'm a physician on staff at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago. And just briefly to let you know my background, I did primary care for the first part of my career, so I have a lot of experience doing that. The past 7 to 10 years, I've really shifted my focus away from primary care. I've done a little health tech consulting, but most of what I have done is to focus on obesity medicine, which is actually a new specialty, and I'm board certified in that. And basically, I help people lose weight. So I have a small private practice fully focused on weight loss, weight management, and to some degree also addressing the many comorbid complications that come along with excess weight: diabetes, high blood pressure, sleep apnea, depression, arthritis, cancer, heart disease, those sorts of things. So that's me. Cool.
Well, yeah. And so the reason why I was excited to connect with you and why we're doing this is, there's a lot, and we've talked to people, on the front lines, really, fighting this. But then there's also, all the people at home that are, sitting at home and kind of, one, wondering what to do, but then two, you know, trying to stay healthy and, you know, get through this. And so I think your perspective on, you know, just what you're seeing would be really good. And then, yeah, like maybe some, you know, we can start brainstorming and maybe some solutions to some of those problems too.
Sure. Well, one thing that's been really interesting to learn about the coronavirus is that we're seeing people who carry excess weight have a much higher rate of serious infection and death. And so it's not really clear why. It's not just that people who have any chronic disease have a higher risk of infection or death, but specifically high blood pressure, diabetes, and obesity. And obesity in the medical field is defined as having a body mass index or BMI of 30 or higher. And so, which actually, you know, more than a third of Americans do fall into that category. If you look at people who are overweight, a BMI of 25 or higher, including people overweight or who have obesity, that's 2/3 to, you know, getting close to 3/4 of people in America struggle with their weight. And so that makes my clients, my patients, a lot more vulnerable to this virus. And so I don't think it needs to be, I don't think people have to feel like it's superficial to be worrying about their weight and trying to watch their weight right now. Coronavirus is going to be with us for a long time. So if you're at home, if you are currently well and you have the time to focus on your health, it's a great time to do so because that's one way you can protect yourself.
Yes. Well, and I know when we were talking last time, it also can be somewhat of a difficult time to do that as well. And so, you know, I think maybe, you know, as far as what we can do from a software perspective, you know, there's software is really good at getting people information. It's really good at connecting people, motivating people. So it would be awesome to, you know, maybe just talk about, you know, ways that you see people being motivated to, you know, to be healthy, you know, or even just some of the problems around like what we're, you know.
Sure. Well, so one thing that already exists is there are a number of apps out there to help people with their health, with their weight, with meditation, with sleep, with mindfulness, you know, with exercise. There's so much available. But I think there's still room for a lot more. And one thing that I've been thinking about is space for people on a more local level to create a support community around that. So it's one thing to be on the Weight Watchers app, which I think is wonderful. I'm a fan of Weight Watchers for people. And I think they've made some awesome improvements to really put their program in line with what the latest science says. With Weight Watchers, you know, it's a big community. So whenever you can make it a little more local, I think that's helpful. That's why Weight Watchers had small local meetings. But I think there's a way to do this. When I think about software and I think about what people can do, I think on a local level, figuring out how to help people connect and support each other. So coming back to the idea of weight, we know that people do better with their weight if they have a supportive community. That can be friends, that can be people in an exercise class, going to a group nutrition program. It can be having a health coach. It can be having a neighbor that you walk with, whatever it is, but some sort of social connectedness around the process of taking care of your health and your weight is very helpful. And so I think there are probably ways that someone could develop, even just building on things that already exist. For example, in my neighborhood, we use the Nextdoor app a lot for everything from, you know, whose lost kitty cat is this to who's making masks. You know, I think those kind of little connections and maybe doing that around health support. Sleep is a really big thing too. We know that when people aren't sleeping well because they're worried, they're ruminating, Maybe they're stuck in a small apartment with someone that they're not getting along with, or they're having a hard time helping their kids with remote learning, whatever it is. When people are tense, when they're stressed, they're not sleeping well, that contributes to poor health outcomes. It contributes to trouble with weight. Stress does, sleep does. I always say for my patients, the 5 S's, we have to get the 5 S's in line. So sorry, I'll have something racy in there. So it's sleep, stress, social connections, it's sugar, and it's sex, which really I use as a proxy for like a healthy, loving relationship. So, or
I think everybody
whatever.
knew what the last S was going to be when you said.
Yeah, you can make that whatever you want it to be. Yeah. Everyone's got their own thing. But I think the 5 S's might be a place for the people who are volunteering their time to brainstorm. How can we get people to put their 5 S's together? Because if you're sleeping well, if you're managing your stress, if you're not eating too much sugar, and really that's just a proxy for healthy eating, if you're socially connected, if you have a good support network, even if it's not even if you don't have someone at home and social distancing is impacting your support network, just figuring out creative ways, how can you connect? Just for example, these video chats, I mean, it probably seems like everybody's doing them. It seems like that to me. But I'm sure there are a lot of people who aren't. Loneliness is an epidemic in our society, and it impacts health outcomes. It impacts weight. And so I think creating some sort of connection, not everyone knows how to create a Zoom account. My parents are struggling a little bit. Well, one set of parents has figured it out and they're having wine with their friends every night. And the other set of parents, they're still kind of trying to figure that out. So improving social connectedness too.
Right. So, I like that idea. It's like it's the community aspect, and it's not a lot like necessarily accountability, but it's just a community. And right now, especially given just what's going on, there is a lack of that. And so, building something that can help connect people in smaller into smaller communities, to stay healthy, when it's just tough right now to do that. And
I think accountability can be positive. Like when people come to me for accountability, sometimes they really want me to hold their feet to the fire and, speak to them like I'm a boot camp instructor. But most of the time, that's really not what inspires people and motivates them and helps them to do well. What the research on behaviors tells us is that when we can catch a positive behavior and then reward that, just with praise or whatever, however you want to reward it, then you can amplify that behavior and get it to happen again. So rewarding that behavior is a really nice version of accountability, finding all of the successes, worrying less about the negative things. And so if I were to create a community for supporting the 5 S's and figuring out how to build in accountability, I would maybe make a support section where anyone who wants to can identify something positive and shout it out. Like one thing I hear you doing really well is you're forgiving yourself for that ice cream you ate yesterday. Or one thing I hear you doing really well is you ate some cookies, but then instead of skipping your next meal to kind of punish yourself for it, instead you nourished yourself with some healthy broccoli at your next meal, or whatever the healthy choice is.
Well, and that's really interesting. So another person I spoke with earlier this week, who works with people that have PTSD about stress, is really kind of right now there's a lot of negative news, there's a lot of things happening, and having being able to look at the positive, even though it's difficult, is really how we can start to de-stress ourselves a little bit. So I think that falls right in line with what she was saying.
Absolutely.
In but specifically food and health, health and nutrition wise. So I think that's really, there's definitely something there. And I think, the designers, as a part of this, can probably have some fun thinking of ways to
make
reinforce
it
positive. Yeah. Through software.
I think so too. I think that's really critical. On social media, there's so much negativity. So we could use a place with positive support. And one thing it's interesting what you were saying about stress management and PTSD. One thing we know is that stress management takes practice. And so you're not going to suddenly manage your stress perfectly by not doing anything and then doing a 1-minute meditation and I got this, now I'm relaxed. And, you have to practice like any skill. So if you want to learn to play the cello, you are not going to just pick up that instrument and assume after trying it once or twice, you're going to know what to do. Instead, you're going to practice a little bit every day. And so practicing gratitude, deliberate gratitude, mindfulness, and other stress management techniques can really help you develop those skills, and then you get good at it. So the Mayo Clinic does a lot of really good work around this. And I learned some of the things that I teach my clients from a course that I attended there and a book that I read that they published on stress management. And I really like, one thing they emphasize is the value of gratitude in managing your own stress. So you might feel really overwhelmed because you're sheltering at home, you're lonely, you lost your job, you can't pay your rent, and you're eating, canned beans, and anyone would feel really stressed and overwhelmed by all of that. But if you can start each day just saying, I'm going to think about 5 people who I'm grateful for. And I'm just going to put a little positive thought out into the universe for those 5 people. You don't have to call them. You don't have to do anything formal, but just maybe in bed in the morning before you get up and get going. But that's a great way to reduce stress. It's just every day, very deliberately, think of 5 people you're grateful for or 5 things you're grateful for and start making that a habit. It's a great stress reliever.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, I think that, it would be cool to have maybe an app or something that could help with that too. I don't know.
Yeah. Like people just throwing out their gratefulness or like pinging you, hey, what are you grateful for today? You've only gotten 3 of your 5 things. So.
Yeah. Well, I really like that. And I think that ties back into like the positivity aspect too, right? Because if you're being grateful, you're thinking about about positivity and, so a few things that we talked about last time that I wanted to touch on, and you just demoed it for us a little bit. You mentioned NEAT.
How
that, how that's something that has kind of changed for a lot of people given this. And so, I don't know if you explain that again, because there might be something there as well.
Great. I would love to talk about NEAT. So NEAT is an acronym, N-E-A-T. It stands for Non-Exercise Activity Thermogenesis. And what that really means is the calories we burn just going through our regular day. So that's not deliberate exercise. That's not when you hop on a treadmill or your Peloton or lift your weights or go for a walk, but instead it's just, I'm walking from the 3rd floor down to the basement with my laundry basket. I'm loading and unloading the washer and dryer, walking back up. I'm folding the clothes up by the bedrooms. I'm putting the sheets away after I fold them, all of these kind of little day-to-day things. So I think most of us, it's not universally true, but I think most of us are getting less NEAT right now. So if you think about a typical commute where I live in the suburbs, most people, they walk to their car in the morning, they hop in the car, they drive to their office, they walk from the parking lot into the building, maybe in the building, they leave at lunchtime to go to a cafeteria or someplace to grab lunch. They come back. And so all of these little movements we would get during the day many of us are not getting those anymore, or much less so, because now our commute is literally, my bed's over there, my desk is over here, and 20 steps that way is the kitchen. You're hardly moving at all. So we have to kind of figure out how to add in more neat. And so that's why having these at my desk, that prompted you to think about it. In a way, I don't know if I would call that neat. It's deliberate, but it's just some kind of movement I'm getting during the day that's separate from going and working out.
Right.
And so even like underneath the desk, so if I'm on an audio call, I'll get up and pace and walk. When I brush my teeth, I'm lunging and squatting, and my husband thinks I'm crazy, but trying to add in little bits of movement throughout the day. But even now, if I'm on a video call and I'm sitting at a desk, my husband has a little pedaler under his desk because he works from home often enough. We've bought one of those. I don't have that. All I'm doing, if these are my legs, I'm just straightening them and, putting them down or going up and down on my tippy toes, but not sitting immobilized. So anyway, I think moving as much as you can, increasing your NEAT, inserting NEAT into activities that you normally do during the day that don't usually incorporate it.
I mean, so maybe there's just like, there could be potentially something that people build. It's just like, neat habits or something like that kind of like give people tips to, hey, this is things you can do during the day to just keep your body engaged,
Moving, yes.
There was two other things I really wanted that from our last conversation that I really wanted to talk about. One, which you just mentioned, was nutrition. And I think you had some really good points about nutrition when we talked last time. And specifically, because a lot of people are financially struggling right now, some ways to do that in an inexpensive fashion. So it would be awesome to get some of your advice on that. And then the second was we ended up talking last time about homemade masks and delivery services and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
And so it would be, we can just touch on that really quickly. But yeah, I wanted to make sure that we got to those two points, because I thought that those were potential, interesting.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I crossed my mind that I should start the interview with one of my crazy fabric homemade masks on. I forgot. Let's talk about nutrition really briefly, because poor nutrition is the #1 cause of preventable death in the United States. And a lot of people have food insecurity right now, many of whom have never experienced that in their lifetimes. And so some advice I can give about things that are more affordable. A lot of times frozen produce or canned produce, fruits and vegetables, will be more affordable than fresh. So that's a great option. And that's something you can buy and let sit on your shelf and not risk that it's going to go bad. If you're buying fresh avocados, it's wonderful, but you can't, first of all, buy that in bulk because they'll go bad. There's only so many you can buy at a time, and they're expensive. So, things like frozen broccoli, frozen fruit, canned beans are a great resource. They're really healthy. They'll give you some protein. They'll give you some fiber. They have some healthy fats. Canned beans are great. So I think last time I told you, I like to make bean bowls. It's really super basic, but to me, this can be a breakfast, a lunch, or a dinner. I just rinse a can of black beans. I like to put a little canned tomatillo sauce on it, but any kind of salsa, or if you have tomatoes, onions, cilantro, fine, great. If you have avocado, a little avocado on it. If you have some store-bought pre-made guacamole, that will last longer. You can put some of that on. If not, that's fine. I also love to put an egg or two on my bean bowl. So I'll make a poached egg or an egg over easy, or if I have a hard-boiled egg. And, it's all warmed up in the microwave. It's really delicious. It's really simple and packed with nutrients. So I think when you're looking at limited resources and maybe limited cooking skills, that's another thing for developers to think about, sharing basic cooking skills. We are not taught that in the way we should be taught that. A lot of my clients don't really know how to cook. And I'm not saying to make glorious recipes that you get off, that you got from Gourmet Magazine or Epicurious or Bon Appetit or something, just like pretty simple basic meal assembly. That might be something else. Like, this is your first time cooking for yourself, you're sheltering at home. Here are 20 quick lessons that every home chef should learn for just very simple basic eating. That would be, I think, useful. Learning to read labels is another big thing. When a label has maltodextrin, xanthan gum, soy lecithin, mono and diglycerides, that's not real food. That's a lot of chemicals, and that's an ultra processed product. And if you can find a real food product that doesn't have all of that, that's a better choice. So, getting food that is more from the produce section, the meat section, the frozen section, meat, deli, fish, those sections, as opposed to the things that are in a box or a container that can sit on the shelf for weeks or months or even years without going bad. These ultra processed foods are killing us. They're really very dangerous for our health and a real source of weight gain for people. So
yeah, and what's cheap and easy to get right now too. So
right.
So yeah, I think that it's hopefully some team picks up that ball and runs with it.
I hope so.
Cool.
What would be interesting is to take for a team to take, like, here's a list of ultra processed things that might be quick and easy, and here's how you can make these same things in a somewhat affordable fashion, and here's a video on how to make it. So an example, like what I will explain to my patients, if you want to know the difference between an ultra processed version of a food and a real version of a food, like think about a beef broccoli lean cuisine type of meal that's got red meat, it's got broccoli, it's got some sort of a sauce, like an Asian flavored sauce, and some brown rice. Now think about that same meal where you just get an inexpensive cut of red meat, have more vegetables than meat, get some frozen broccoli, maybe an onion, chop that all up, stir fry it in a pan, throw some soy sauce on it, make some brown rice. You can make that pretty affordable and make enough to last for several meals. And that's real food. That can be a weight loss or a weight neutral meal. The ultra processed version that can sit in a freezer for 2 years, that's more likely to be a weight gain product, even if the calories are the same.
Interesting.
Because it has all those ultra processed ingredients. So yeah.
Well, I definitely want to try to get some like resources from you that like just even places to look so that we can share that with the teams. But yeah, and I guess the other thing we might not get to right now is we were talking last time about maybe like, bundling local grocery services.
Oh yeah, we did talk about that.
Things like that. And so that would be, I think interesting, an interesting thing to explore, but basically, there's grocers that usually sell to restaurants and things like that like you have supply right now. And I don't know, you had some really good ideas around that.
In Chicago, there are people who are coming together. So people who deliver food to restaurants are trying to sell it locally to families and deliver it, but they are also connected with someone who makes cheese. And we were talking last time about, wouldn't it be great if they also connected to someone who's making masks, like those homemade cloth masks, and they can connect with someone who's, I don't know, selling a homemade cleaning product and, maybe some hair dye for us ladies who are struggling, whatever it is. But, lots of local businesses could come together and pool their resources to deliver, like, here's your product, here are your products for the week or your products for the next 2 weeks. Only a part of that is food, but it's other things that you need. I mean, I know that sort of sounds like what the grocery store delivery services or the Amazon delivery services, but on a very local level, it'd be nice to do
Well,
that.
and they're overwhelmed. I mean, I know a bunch of people who we can't even get like a delivery service, like a grocery delivery service right now. So they're overwhelmed. So it could just be interesting to, like a very local thing and, connecting, because I don't know. I mean, it's something to explore.
I think tapping a restaurateur, reaching out to the general manager of a big local restaurant and saying, who are your food suppliers? And are those people trying to put together something to deliver locally? Can you connect us?
I'm hoping to get a restaurant owner to talk to this restaurant owner in the next couple of days. But
that'd be a great addition.
Yeah, I have a couple leads. I'm trying to get somebody.
You and all the people that are going to be doing this hackathon, you're doing a wonderful, wonderful thing. I mean, there's a role for everyone to play, not just healthcare workers and first responders. I mean, I didn't think as a doctor I would be sewing homemade masks, but now I think I've got 50 of them distributed around. We can all help in unexpected ways that we didn't think would be useful. But in a pandemic, everyone's got a role.
Well, I have my friend Debbie Rosman, who is the president of HeartMath with me. Debbie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, so nice to be here with you, Tony, and all the people, and during this time period. And yes, I'm the presidency of HeartMath Incorporated, and our whole mission is to help, and has been for 30 years, to help activate the heart of humanity.
Yeah.
Heart is something more than just our beating physical heart, but our research showing there's a big connection between our emotional heart, energetic heart, spiritual heart, physical heart. And that's what I believe this whole shift we're going through is about.
Yeah. Well, and so we have, as part of this hackathon, medical experts and small business experts and things like that. And, I wanted to bring Debbie in to talk about, specifically the emotional, emotional health side of this, because, as we were just talking about, like, this is a major event, like a big trauma event. The word unprecedented has been used a lot, but I mean, there's a lot of sadness around this, and I think being able to maybe build things that can respond to that would be, it is going to be really important. And so, I wanted to get your thoughts on, what, and even just your observations on what we're seeing short-term, medium-term, and long-term.
Right.
So if it maybe, I don't know, what are your thoughts, like short-term, and like, how are people responding to this? I know you work with, people closely on, getting better connection, to their hearts and, handling stressful times like this.
Well, it's really interesting. My background's a behavioral psychologist, and I've written, co-authored books on transforming stress, transforming anger, transforming anxiety. So this whole area of understanding the physiological mechanisms of how we react, how we perceive, how we handle stress has been our specialty at HeartMath, researching since 1991, and providing people with simple, scientifically validated tools and technologies and apps to be able to shift that internal nervous system response and be able to maintain more emotional poise, to make better decisions, have more clarity, even in high stress situations, which is what we're experiencing right now.
Right.
And you talk about, just looking through the lens of short term, there's a lot of dimensions of experience going on right now with this global pause that we've all been put into. through sheltering at home, businesses such as ours and yours, people working from home, many people being furloughed or laid off because the companies can't afford to maintain payroll, and at the same time not sure whether they'll even survive. So there's a lot of fear financially. There's a lot of fear health-wise, even though we seem to be getting a handle on flattening the curve as of today. But nevertheless, there's uncertainty about when we'll be having a vaccine or a treatment, or whether you can get it again once you've had the virus. And that creates a lot of fear in people who may have been already anxious prior to this whole epidemic or pandemic.
Yeah.
And just one more other statistic, 30% increase in prescriptions for anti-anxiety medication is something we all need to ponder. And we've been working at HeartMath. We have a lot of HeartMath certified chief nurses in the Kaiser and Dignity hospital systems. And they have been coming to us for support to use the HeartMath techniques and tools and technology during these times, because they're so challenged and they're so giving of themselves and putting themselves at risk. So you can look through the lens of the problem, which are real, and you can also look through the lens of people's care and heart and the higher aspects of humanity that's opening up and coming together is something I want to spend a little time on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so first, I know HeartMath has a ton of really good resources and stuff that we will, you know, and you just released the HeartMath experience. So we'll link to that, you know, for teams that are interested in you know, working on this aspect of you know, the response. And so I guess, Debbie, what I wanted to talk about was like, you know, so there's a lot of fear and anxiety and things like that. What are, you know, some of the things that help us get through that? You know, so that, because I mean, maybe there's a piece of software that somebody can write that, you know, facilitates a connection or something like that, you know?
Well, you know, the research at HeartMath, and now there's over 400 independent peer-reviewed published papers confirming this, is that the best thing we can do for anxiety, depression, fear, it's not going to go away overnight, but we have to be able to get our heart, brain, and nervous system synchronized. Because what that does, it sends a different signal to the higher centers of the brain and the frontal lobe areas so that we can begin to see new possibilities and a bigger picture. That's what really releases anxiety. Sure, it's the heart connection with friends and support groups and being able to lean on somebody and have that love and that care. But it's love and care and compassion and appreciation and gratitude and those qualities of the heart that research has shown actually activate that heart, brain, nervous system synchronization to open up the bigger picture, the frontal lobes. So we can perceive possibilities that we can't see when we're stress reaction. When you're anxious, stressed, frustrated, it shuts down those higher centers of the brain. And it puts us into a fight, flight, fright, survival mode, releasing a lot of cortisol, the stress hormone, maybe adrenaline, because the body is prepped to go into survival. It's a protective mechanism, but it does not provide hope. Mm-hmm. And hope comes, that's real hope, from seeing new possibilities. And let's just say anything that we can develop as app developers that can help people not have idealism, but really feel and see possibilities is what we need right now. And when you look at, like last night, I watched We're All in This Together, I forget the name, One World All Together, which was a special on ABC, CBS, NBC, of all these musicians coming together, Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, and others coming together and hosting this. And it was all about the love, the care, the appreciation for the healthcare workers, how much more connection we're having, even through Zoom meetings where we get to see each other
Yeah.
There is a lot of heart happening, a whole opening of heart across the planet as people know they need to take care of themselves and take care of each other. So I think that's important is whatever apps we develop to encourage that, because that creates a rush of other hormones, oxytocin, DHEA, the anti-aging hormone. When we can help people relieve stress, whether it's through laughter or fun or true heart connection with ourselves, it actually produces hormones that are beneficial and healthy to the immune system, to the whole body, and opens up those higher perceptual centers in the brain. So short term, medium term, long term, I feel that's where humanity's going.
Yeah.
And of course, HeartMath developed a sensor where you can see your heart rhythm pattern change called the inner balance sensor as you feel gratitude or appreciation or care or compassion. And that helps trains people into how to shift quickly from frustrated, impatient, angry states into this smooth heart rhythm, which signals the brain and opens up better choices and clarity. So people can develop apps. We're hoping to have a Unity plugin very soon that people could actually use our sensor and develop fun games. But that's the medium term, and the long term is whatever we can do to lift the human spirit.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Well, I love talking to you because you've definitely been the quickest to go from short term to long term, but that's awesome. I mean, and so really, it sounds like what you're saying is like short term, we have fear and anxiety, and we're sitting on the couch and reading endless news stories about this just devastating, health wise and financial situation that's going on right now. But how we're going to get through this is to start looking for the opportunities and the and the connection that we can have, and the elements of the heart.
Exactly right. We decided to give away our new training program, the HeartMath Experience, which has 5 scientifically validated tools and techniques that you can shift mood, shift perception right in the moment. And you're doing it. It's not anyone doing it to you. And you're just seeing a new perspective. And that's probably the best anti-anxiety, antidepressive medication you could do, because it's your inner pharmacy you're changing.
I know you do a lot of work with people that have experienced PTSD. And I mean, what we are all going through is a kind of a traumatic event. So it's going to be really important for us to be able to, come out of this healthy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Prevent and recover, so it's not a long road to recovery. Right. And that's actually been one of HeartMath's specialties, and why our research has been. We created a whole trauma relief program that's actually also free to first responders. That was developed after the Paradise Fire, because there's so much trauma there. And we thought it was developed for the people who endured the fire, but it was the first responders who needed it the most.
Yeah.
Because of their traumatization just helping. And we're going to see that again right now with our healthcare workers. Everybody's appreciating them, and at 7 o'clock at night, we go out and cheer them, and they appreciate that while they're in triage mode. What about afterwards?
I'm wondering, so as far as like ideas to maybe out of the box ways to get people more like connected with their heart, or not out of the box, but more quick things that people could do in a hackathon like this. You mentioned connection, appreciation,
right.
Those sorts of things. I feel like those are set up really well to potentially have a team work on something like, a cool, interesting way to connect when you're isolated. I don't know, stuff like that. There was an app you were saying that you thought was pretty cool recently. Do you want to talk about that maybe?
Well, yeah, I just heard about it today. It's called Gentle. It's in beta, and it's people saying, "Hi, I need help. I'm worried," and then how other people can respond to help with kindness. If anything that can help people connect in heart qualities, kindness, care, compassion, appreciation, love, that'll help lift people and this is the science, out of the worry. Because when we're worried and upset and anxious and stressed, impatient, frustrated, our heart rate variability, our heart rhythms become very jagged and irregular. About how we feel inside when you see it on an app or on a monitor.
Mm-hmm.
And when we shift and we learn how to shift to genuine feelings, because it has to be a feeling shift or it won't shift your heart rhythm, you see the heart rhythm change into this beautiful sine wave harmonious rhythm. That's what our technology measures, but our apps help train people to do that. Now, there's all sorts of beautiful creative things people can do, developers can do to help facilitate that shift. I mean, even fun things like this. One of the awesome things that I see, because Earth Day is on Wednesday, is what's happening to the planet Earth. I mean, you just hear things like the vibration of the Earth's crust has gone down because there's less noise pollution, because people aren't driving. This is throughout the planet. You hear animals, you know, are walking down main streets, you know, not just scary animals like fox and bears, but, you know, rabbits and ducks and, you know, goats. I mean, that's fun. That lifts people's spirit to see that. Anything that can open the heart, lift the spirit, that's what we need in apps. And anything that can facilitate people really feeling getting the hormonal changes that they get, and the nervous system changes by sustained feelings of gratitude or love or care or compassion or kindness.
Right.
Softness of heart. That's the effect you want to evoke in the apps you develop.
Yeah. Well, I think, that's important. And so it's an open prompt. But, you know, having, I mean, connection, appreciation, like I'm just looking at this app, you know, it's people really, you know, just sending messages and letters to each other. You know, it's a way for us to get connected. Maybe it's a wildlife spotting out my window app or something like that, you know, like,
exactly. And it's right now it's spring. Like what beauty do you see? You know, that's now like an Instagram beauty thing. You know, what do you see? And share the imagination. If you look for opportunity to lift spirit, you just look around yourself outside your window in nature. You look at what's inspiring you these days, and you look at the news to see what's the good that's happening, what's inspiring people, because almost every news will end with that, something uplifting after all the horrible statistics. And let that spark your imagination. Ask your own heart, what would nurture people right now? What would facilitate them experiencing more heart connection, not just mind connection, but real connection, because that's the greatest gift you can give anyone. That is soothing. It's self-soothing, and it soothes anxiety, depression, it facilitates mental health and emotion.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just reminded of John Krasinski, the Jim from The Office, just released that good news program, and it's just like taking off because he's just sitting there talking about good news, you know. And so yeah, we're going to need more of that in a time of bad news, you know. There's
a lot of good news happening. It depends on which lens you want to look at. You can look at both of them. It's like a new world emerging in the old world, because we're not going to go back to where we were. We don't know where we're going, but we can help co-create and shape it to be a kinder world, be a more gentle world, be a world where we take care of each other instead of just totally focused on our own self aggrandizement or greed or security. Our security, one of the lessons of this virus is our security is dependent upon each other. Your security, each other. We're all so connected. And the more we can highlight and facilitate that awareness that we're interconnected, that it's not just about me or just about America or just about anyone, it's about all of us as one humanity. And people feel that connection, that will be the new world we're creating.
Right. And even if we get vaccines for this one, I mean, whatever's next, I mean, we are as vulnerable as our most vulnerable, you know?
Right. Exactly.
It is time to get more connected.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, do you have any other thoughts, prompts to help people think of creative ideas?
Well, I think I'd love people to get the Harvard experience because it's free, and that'll give you ideas. You'll see the research, the science, the techniques. Please feel free. Experience.heartmath.com. Go there, download it, and be creative and connect with Tony or myself on ideas because we're all co-creating new experiences.
Yeah, and we'll link to this stuff too. We're gonna have a resource center for people also. All right, well, Debbie, thanks so much. Always appreciate talking with you. So
you too. Take care, everybody. Take care of yourself and take care of each other. Bye.
All right. Well, so that is all of our panelists. It's had some just amazing conversations. Wanted to end with Debbie, telling us about how how we really have a choice to look at the positive and try to start building a new world from where we're at. And so that's really what we're trying to do today. There's people that have been working now for a couple hours on different hacks to try to start solving some of the problems that we're seeing. So we're gonna be off of the live stream for a couple hours. We'll be back on tomorrow at 2 PST or PDT, and we'll have some of the results to show everybody. But in the meantime, have a good night. Check out the Room Service Festival if you want to listen to some good tunes while you're hacking. And yeah, look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Cheers.